All right, so welcome to the infamous ex-chief, where we stand for truth, accountability, and real justice. And I've got some echo. If everybody could mute for me. Today we were bringing you a powerful roundtable discussion. Joining us are Darren and Rick from the Invisible Ships Podcast, the team that first brought national attention to the unanswered questions surrounding Brian Macron's death. Their investigative work laid the foundation for uncovering the contradictions and inconsistencies.
I really need a piece of tape.
We're also honored to have Victoria Macron, Brian's wife, with us. No one has fought harder to get real answers about what happened, and today she has the platform to speak on the record, challenge the misinformation, and set the story straight. We also have a guest producer today that I want to thank very much, and I'll leave it up to them if they want to be identified. They will be hopefully assisting us with questions and maybe sharing their screen about topics. All right, and that's awesome. All the feedback is gone now. Before we dive in, we want to take a moment to acknowledge a group tuning in together for this event, the Shakedown to Shackles. We see you watching, and we appreciate your interest in the discussion. And the more eyes on this case, the harder it is for the truth to be ignored. This is more than just a conversation. It's an opportunity for you to be part of the search for answers. And if you're watching live, drop your questions in the chat. If you want to join the conversation on air, use the audience link in our description. Justice doesn't come from silence. It comes from exposing the facts. So let's get started. I'm going to turn it over to you, Rick and Darren here.
Hey, Scott, Victoria. You want to ask your question? Yeah. So, Scott, excited that you are, getting in part of the Macron case and digging into it, something that people in Medina County and have been asking about for a long time. And it's exciting to have somebody like you that has professional experience as an investigator looking at things. I've been listening to your show, and one of the things that I wanted to ask you, and I was excited to have this opportunity, was that when you go into an investigation and you start digging around, is there any kind of like telltale signs that you can see that would maybe suggest to you that some of the evidence has been tampered with, that maybe you are purposely being misled, that there are parties trying to keep you from getting the truth? And is that different from just, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, can you tell by looking at a case that we just simply don't have enough information to see our way through to the end? Or are we like looking at, fully laid red herrings and things like that? I hope that wasn't too long-winded.
No, I think you're basically asking if there's deception that's afoot, essentially, whether or not an investigator typically can pick up on that and where that essentially leads the investigation. And so, yes, I mean, people lie in investigations all the time. So the important thing is to basically keep all the facts in the back of your head. And sometimes the facts may not seem relative, like at the time, but you investigate I keep saying this over and over. I don't think it takes a genius, honestly, to solve any crime, a murder, homicide, anything of that nature. And I would always tell my younger detectives that, all right, it doesn't take a genius. It takes somebody that's methodical about going through an investigation, learning all the facts and evidence, following that evidence wherever it takes you. I mean, no matter how unlikely it seems at the time, follow those facts and essentially attempt to either eliminate whether or not they're plausible or not. But you always still, even though you don't think that they're plausible at the time, I can't even tell you the amount of investigations I've been involved with where initially it was such a far-fetched thing that I'm like, there's no way that this possibly could have happened. But I kept it in the back of my mind, because then as you start to investigate, it starts to come back up to the front, essentially, the forefront of the investigation. So I personally have a theory that no crime is unsolvable with the right amount of information. There's an actual criminalistic law. I think it's called the Macron law, or not, that's Macron, not the Macron law. I can't remember. It's evading me what the law is at this point. But basically the more violence that happens, the more evidence is going to leave, and the more probable that it can be solved. So I think in this case, we're at a very staggered stage because I don't believe that this has been investigated, and the little bit of investigation that was conducted by the Medina County Sheriff's Department, I think has left us really behind the 8 ball. So in any investigation, I think the public has to be at the forefront. And why they didn't include the public initially when this happened, I don't know. And I think that because of that, we've lost a lot of key witnesses that are just coming now. I mean, I get texts and messages from people that live in Chippewa Lake that were around when this happened, and that they're amazed to this day that they were never interviewed or spoken to. And again, it's just one person that sometimes really kicks something overboard and starts the investigation to go full throttle. So one person who might not even think that what they saw or heard or know of to be really important, a lot of times those facts can really come around full circle. That was really long-winded. I apologize. Did I answer your question? Or?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And I believe I'm getting notifications that we are having issue with the Rumble. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on there. But the folks at Rumble may not be seeing us at this point, so I'm trying to figure that out. But okay, thank you. That was our lovely guest producer. I don't know if anybody honestly can hear her other than us, but she's let us know that she's posting the YouTube link, essentially trying to get everybody from Rumble over to YouTube so that we can have the discussion there. But so we have a list of some of our questions or things that we thought were the greatest misinformation. But I wanted to ask Darren and Rick, when you guys left, essentially, I think, was it 6 episodes or 7?
Total episodes?
Yes.
Or like our original plan?
I didn't know we were going to ask hard questions like this.
I think it's more. I think it's like I think maybe 9.
Oh, you had
we
9
did some
episodes?
stuff about the BCI investigation and stuff as it came out, but essentially, yeah, it was like less than 10 episodes.
Okay. And just bringing me up to timeline, because I purposely, I talk about this, I purposely sometimes don't listen to certain material because I just don't want to get biased by where people have gone down before. So I have listened to a couple of your episodes where I thought they were relevant, like some of the episodes that you talked to specific witnesses and things of that nature, because I thought it was very important. But where did you guys leave off essentially after episode 9? And I just talked to Darren the other day. I actually just did receive some public records from BCI, and I don't even know if you guys know your YouTube. I'm sorry, not your YouTube. Your podcast is actually in the BCI records. I don't know if you guys know that. So, but where did you guys leave off?
Like our last one, it kind of covered like. So the BCI report came out. We did some interviews that we aired from the BCI report, and kind of drew the inconsistencies. Like they said, there was no DNA other than Brian's. That's what Sentner said, and like clearly they had other DNA that they didn't find out what it was, and they say it in the interviews. And then like his cell phone ping on the backside of the lake, which doesn't put him at his house or at the town hall.
No other vehicles were at the township building when he was there, when it turned out to be there was another vehicle. So those were the things. We were just kind of highlighting the stuff as we had just received the BCI report. It came out recently, and they had closed the case, right, and released that stuff. And we were kind of going through that and trying to see if it made sense to us. And that's kind of where we left off. And I know a lot has happened in the years after we stopped.
And to me, it's very ironic because there's no reason to. First off, you have an undetermined death by your own coroner. You have an undetermined death, so there's no reason, in my opinion, this case should have been closed. And I'm not really understanding the politics of Medina County as far as Forrest Thompson, the prosecutor. Is the more that I get involved with this case, I mean, the guy apparently runs everything. He runs the sheriff's department, the coroner's office. I mean, the guy runs everything, and everybody just takes their cue from Forrest Thompson, the prosecutor, and that's just very weird to me. I mean, the sheriff has the ability to keep this case open. He can open it at any time he wants. He's the highest elected law enforcement official of the county. He doesn't need Forrest to tell him what to do. But it seems to, I don't know what's going on with Medina County, but Forrest Thompson although his email states to me that he did not, the records that I'm getting show that he was getting tired, essentially, of this investigation going on, and that he essentially closed this investigation.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He closed it.
And it makes no sense to me.
And he said it publicly. Like, it's not like it's,
Yes.
you know, he said that publicly.
So anytime you have an undetermined death, in my opinion, I mean, I've never seen any undetermined death closed. So this is like the first for me, seeing that this case has an undetermined death by their own coroner, and that they closed it, and nobody's actively investigating. But at the same time, now you have a closed investigation where everybody seems to be very secretive and guarded with the records. If it's closed, why not release the records? I'm confused what they're doing. But when you guys, so basically the case had just gotten closed when you guys stopped your podcast, essentially.
So they closed it like before the election, and I think our last one was just after Christmas that we our last episode that we launched. It was like in the new, or right around Christmas. So like we I think launched like maybe 4 episodes I think after they closed it, kind of summarizing some inconsistencies in it. You know, the tricky part is like you know, Rick and I you never did a Freedom of Information Act before, right?
No.
Yeah, we've never pulled a record before Macron's case, you know? So, I mean, like, what's supposed to be in there, what we have access to, you know, like, we didn't know. Like, I assume that when I asked, and call me naive, but if I go to the sheriff's department and I say, I want the entire case of Brian Macron, including audio, any video footage, you know, and the whole case report, that I would actually get that. You know, like that kind of makes sense to me. But like I got like a summary of it 2 weeks later, and then you try to do it again, and it's like you just get, you know, I didn't know what I was missing.
And it seemed like every other person too that requested it would be getting different information that we didn't have and that nobody else had. It's like they were just randomly throwing stuff in a bag and handing it out. And so that's why the other episodes started trickling out, is because other people were doing their own requests and finding information that we didn't have and sharing it with us. So we were all just trying to piece stuff together.
At one point,
and at that point,
well,
oh, go ahead.
Victoria, go ahead.
She froze.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right. So okay, there you go.
okay, am I good?
Yes.
At one point, Charlie, the investigator, even made a statement to me and my attorney at the time and said he had to go back to them after he was going through everything that they gave him. He had to go back to the Medina County Sheriffs and ask them for additional information because they didn't provide all of it when they turned over the case files.
So is that unusual, Scott?
Yes, it's completely unusual. And even with me, if we get going here, I can probably share some of the email responses I'm receiving from the sheriff's department. They are literally trying to cherry pick what they want to give me. I'm asking very, very specific items, and they're attempting to like almost avoid those items and cherry pick. And I keep having this dialogue with I think her name is Rebecca. I keep having this dialogue with her. Hey, listen, it started off very pleasant. It's not so pleasant of a conversation now because I don't appreciate being steered down. If I'm asking for records, give me the records. Don't point me over here and tell me not to look behind the curtain. I don't appreciate that. And so, but to answer your question, no, it's not normal. I mean, that's not a normal aspect. When you ask for all the records of Brian Macron case, you should not have to specify, hey, I want body. So, they initially released the 41 pages of investigation that they did back then. And I said, well, hang on. I've just learned that there's body camera footage. You guys didn't give me the body camera footage. And it's just a constant thing. Well, hey, where's the autopsy? So it's like for everything that they give me, there's 15 other things that they haven't given me. And so, no, it's not normal at all. I did want to circle back real quick before, and I guess I don't want to go all over the place, but you had mentioned the video, which is the video, just giving everybody up to speed in case some of my viewers aren't completely familiar. There's a video from the Lafayette Market. Apparently they had been getting, I believe, broken in and cigarettes stolen. So they had just actually put up a new video camera system in their store. And I'm almost positive, and again, this is differently or generally documented when an investigator goes in and he looks at a CCTV system. He documents, okay, this is event driven, meaning that the camera is only picking up like movement or infrared. And that will be noted in a report. And they'll also state, okay, I looked and the CCTV system started on December, I'm just using this as a hypothesis, everybody. Okay, but they'll say, hey, the CCTV footage started on December 15th and went through till December 17th. And they'll give specific times. December 15th at 5 p.m. till December 17th at 7 a.m. And so, that was pretty cool. I don't know how you did that. Okay. But it wasn't done in this case. The investigator never noted like the pulling or the viewing of the video, which is extremely aggravating. So my question is, and I think Darren, when we were on our last episode together, I was like literally showing reviews of that camera. So Medina County Detective Cartwright, who initially was investigating this, relied almost solely on that timeline from the Lafayette Township video system. And I have shown and proven you cannot rely on that. There were literally vehicles disappearing in mid-frame. It was not recording everything. So, and they're using that as a strict timeline. Well, no, nothing could have happened. Nobody else could have came during these times. That's not true at all. And to make that statement is just totally false. It's event. I think it's event driven, and I think it's actually. And Darren, I think you corrected me last time. Is it 42 that goes crossways?
The 42 is we're across the market, and then 162 is what the town hall's on.
So I think if you actually watch the video, it's activating on the cars that are going sideways or on 42. They're going across from the Lafayette Market. I don't think it's actually picking up very many cars that are on Wedgwood coming up to the Township Hall. And like I said, the one when we were actually doing this, I don't know if you remember, there was a car that turned from 42 onto Wedgwood, and then I don't know if you remember, I was like, where'd the car go? It just like vanished off the screen. Again, so it leads me to believe two things. Either it's been altered, which I don't think. I don't want to put that conspiracy theory out there. I don't think it's been altered. I have no reason to think it's altered, but it only leaves you a couple of different options. Was it altered, or was it event-driven and not recording everything? And I think it was event-driven, not recording everything. Somebody had noted the video surveillance was only, I don't know if you put that across, Miss Producer. Okay. Yeah, that was definitely an odd point for whatever reason. And again, normally it would be documented. Hey, maybe they only had until 7:02 for whatever reason, but it was never documented by Detective Cartwright. It should have stated, hey, I pulled the video. So for me, from a previous investigator's point of view, I would have pulled as much video as I possibly could have. If there were 30 days available, I would have pulled 30 days worth of video. And I would have pulled it all the way up past the responding officers. I would have pulled it, all essentially as much as I possibly could, because you never know what you need. You're never going to know, oh, wait, 15 days ago, you might come down in this investigation and figure out 15 days ago, somebody came in and was threatening or something. Okay, well, I need that video. So if I don't pull it, it's not there. And so I guess that's where we're battling at this point, is the lackadaisical attitude, apparently, of this investigation has led us where we are at this point, where Medina County didn't do anything. Now, one of the points that we did bring up, and I feel like I'm monopolizing, so you guys can interrupt at any point. The one of the key factors that I want to dispel, and I think our producer wants to dispel, is that a lot of people seem to think that there are 3 agencies that have investigated this, and I've talked about it in my shows. This was not investigated by 3 different agencies, and I'm going to break it down, all right? So you have the Medina County Sheriff's Department, who did a 42-page investigation, and most of them, it doesn't even make any sense. They're like narrative, it's just run-on sentences. And just to give you an idea, a normal missing person investigation is probably going to be in the hundreds of pages, all right? So you have 42 pages that they originally did, and it was a very lackluster investigation that they completed. There was hardly any follow-ups that were conducted. There were so many witnesses that basically, apparently we lost Victoria. Oh, there were so many follow-ups that were never completed. You back? There were so many follow-ups that were never completed. So then you have BCI. So everybody thinks, oh, well, BCI is here to save the day. Listen, I was tasked with BCI on a task force for over a year, and I actually worked with Charlie Snyder. I have nothing against Charlie Snyder, but he's an evidence technician. He's not an investigator. I don't even know how he was assigned as an investigator to this case. He essentially is, he comes along to crime scenes and he analyzes the crime scene. That's what Charlie Snyder does. And you could, again, his investigation just essentially goes over the same investigation, or what little investigation from Medina County there was, and he just basically mirrors it. He basically calls in the same people that Medina County has talked to. He essentially just goes over that same investigation. He doesn't actually do anything additional. And then he finds out about the jogger. Apparently, they had already closed the case, apparently. And then they find out about the jogger. I think her name was Connie, and they find out about this jogger, and he makes this half-hour conversation with her, where apparently he doesn't even bother to preempt and read what she originally had stated to the Medina County Sheriff's Department, because he doesn't even ask any follow-up questions. Doesn't even ask her about the car that she's maybe saw in her original state with Medina County. Her original statement stated that she may have seen an additional vehicle parked that was down by the playground, which is away from the beach side, or the beach area where Brian's car was. But he doesn't even ask her about it. It's just like a really quick conversation, essentially just crossing it off his list of things to do. And so my point is, BCI doesn't investigate. They just go over what Medina County Sheriff's Department didn't do. And then you have the FBI. People think that the FBI was involved. The FBI was involved, but they did not investigate. The FBI essentially were directed during certain times. They perform what they consider a civilian assist, where Medina County said, "Hey, we need this piece of evidence analyzed." All right, and I believe it was a cell phone, if I recall correctly, or maybe it was a laptop. But they were not actually doing an active investigation on their own. They simply were just going back to whatever Medina County needed assistance with, and they were just following up with whatever requests Medina County had. So I definitely want to dispel this misinformation. I hear it constantly. I see it on social media, on Medina County's, all the Facebook pages. There's total misinformation where people think that 3 different agencies have investigated. It hasn't even been investigated by one agency, folks.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
So, Victoria, we've talked, but I have yet to interview you yet, and I sort of have done that on purpose, and hopefully you don't think that that's a slight. But I want to hear from you now. So I know you've sort of have told this already, but can you give us the morning of December 16th?
Just, I mean, I know in the beginning of any investigation that they are, you always have to treat everyone as a suspect. I get that. That's fine. They came in my house. I had about 30 some people here, family members, came in my house maybe 2 minutes, asked me a couple questions. That is the only thing they ever asked me. They were asking a local township trustee more information about my husband and my family than they were asking his own wife.
So I do recall, I don't know,
It's unconscionable behavior. They should have been talking to me. They should have been talking to my family members, the people that are closest to Brian, and none of it was done. So my red flag went up right away. They obviously either know something that they don't want me to know, whatever. But once you rule me out as a suspect, you should be asking me. They should have asked me for a photo for his missing flyers. They should have asked me his height, his weight. They never asked me any of that. Can you guess who they probably asked it to? A local township trustee. Provided pictures. I had to go back on every social media website, correct his height and weight. I had to call Dateline NBC. They were posting it on their social media, incorrect. They were putting out the pictures or the information of what he was wearing that night at the township party, where if they would have just asked me, I could have told them, no, he was not wearing that. Because I saw it was at our house.
And I think
I'm telling you from day one, I knew they weren't doing what they should have been doing. I don't believe they have the proper experience. I even asked them, why do you not have a homicide detective in Medina County? We don't need one, is what I was told. There was no prior training that Cartwright even received. He handed me his business card and I said, where are your credentials? You're a road duty officer issuing tickets and writing for busted out taillights, and now all of a sudden you become a detective on a homicide case? It was listed as homicide, just so everyone knows. It was a homicide case from the beginning.
I did mention it prior, I believe, on one of the episodes. Cartwright, I believe, had. You can go online, folks. You can actually go to OPATA officer search, and now OPATA has public records on every officer, every police officer in the state of Ohio, and you can see what kind of training the officer has taken. And when I went and I initially started listening to him, and I think I actually had made this comment. And listen, he might be the nicest guy in the world, and I apologize if he is, all right? But when I'm listening to his interview with BCI, I honestly thought I was listening to Barney Fife. Just the comments that he was making, the follow-up questions that he was talking about, they were not the conversation that I would think that a investigator would be having. But so then it got me to thinking, well, let's look him up. So in 1991, I believe it was, he had maybe a week course in crime scene investigation, I believe. So from 1991, he has a week-long class for crime scene investigation, and that's it. I mean, he's got other training, but nothing relative to detective work. And so it just totally blew my mind, the fact that again, you have one of the highest profile cases in Medina County, and you assign this guy who has a 1-week course back in 1991, and it was just totally astonishing to me. So I can't even imagine the frustration that you went through initially. And to answer your question, yeah, you should have been treated as a suspect. Every family member should. But there's still questions that they should be asking you in real time. whether or not they think that you're a suspect or not. They should have been asking you background questions to formulate in their investigation. And so I guess I was going to ask you the video, and we had a brief conversation. The video that they have where they're at your house, and it looks like you're probably having family over for support. That was essentially the only interview that they conducted of you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's alarming.
And in the very beginning, I believe it was Sergeant Ross at the time who started the investigation. And I think he had just come off of a trip or something from Texas. And I don't know why, but it got turned over to Cartwright. But I do remember also speaking to Captain Ross in the very beginning. And I said, I want to know what's going on. Like you need to tell me what you're doing, or if you can't, I understand, but I need to know that you're working on this case. And he said, well, there's really nothing new to tell you, but if we find out anything, you'll be the first to know. Okay. So then I said, well, I want a meeting with you. I called the meeting at the sheriff's department and had my family members with me. I called the meeting, and it was after my work schedule one day. And I said, no, I work until 4:30. So when I'm done with work, then we'll conduct this meeting. And he said, okay. So we had that meeting, and they tried to say that FBI was involved, and they had some guy walk through the room, claims he was from FBI. The only reason, if FBI was involved, is because they made up some god-awful story that said Brian may have run off to California, and because it would cross state lines, that the FBI could be involved. They did put a billboard up in the downtown Cleveland with the FBI logo. They did do that. He was also on Crime Stoppers. And the only reason I believe they ever said, or why they said that he ran to California, because in the front of his phone, the flip part of his phone, it was a business card from his customer in California. That's the only way I can predict why they would have made that statement.
And I've asked that question before because I had no idea where that went, and from the investigation, how they picked California or why they decided to formulate that. Again, because nothing was investigated, or nothing was documented. I'm sorry. Nothing was documented as to their theory of why he was out of state, which made no sense to me.
Right.
But that we do have, and I don't want to, I had some people contact me prior, so people were wanting to ask questions. They didn't want to use their username, so I'm not going to call their username out. I don't know if it's visible or not to everybody else, but so Victoria, you did have someone asked, I'm curious about who was in Victoria's home prior to her arriving and what their purpose was being there.
There were people in my home before I even arrived. As I approached, because my daughter told me they were in here, Jim Sanford, I believe Jim Harhay was here at one point, Captain Sentner, Linda Bowers. Yeah, they came in. Unless you're a law enforcement officer, you should not be in someone's house, especially before the homeowner is home. I have a real problem with that. They were allowed, everybody was allowed to the crime scene. They never roped anything off. Everybody was allowed to come in and view. I did the CAD logs. I saw everybody, every officer, where they were when they checked in, the times. I have their patrol car numbers. They were all up at the town hall as well, and they were at my house. I came outside. Prior trustee is standing with their hands behind her back, and the other James Sanford, and I looked at them and I said, what is going on? I said, do you know where Brian is? And they just looked and shook their head. No. And then immediately after, now how did that prior trustee get here? is what I would like to know. Who was she riding with? I'm thinking James Sanford. Second of all, why are you in my house? You were not welcome in my house.
And from her interview, Victoria, she was even going through or attempting to go through Brian's computer or something to look at his American Express card or I did want to point that out. So there, and maybe I'm not the best person to be talking about finances, but I'm a very paranoid person as far as people steal identity all the time, and so she made all of these accusations. Essentially, well, he shreds his American Express statements, and she makes this comment to whoever was interviewing her. I don't even know who the deputy was, and he seconds it, like gives her props, basically cosigns and says, "Yeah, I that's just weird."
Well, and my question is, why are you even here? You're a coworker. You're a coworker. You're nothing more than acquaintance, a coworker. You want to claim that our family was such great friends, and okay, yes, at times you had asked my children to come over and bake cookies. That's fine. We did that. I was being nice, okay? I was being nice. You are allowed to be nice to the people you work with, but remember, we are acquaintances through work. There's no reason why this person should have been involved in this investigation as much as they were.
But
they were listening to her. That's the thing. The Medina County Sheriffs were actually listening to her.
They were. It's actually very scary. She was actually leading. I hope, and if you guys haven't seen her interview, I think it was not the last episode, 2 episodes from now, please go back and listen to her interview, because you can almost like write. I think the Ohio Peace Officer Training Association should be looking at examples of how not to run investigations, how not to do interviews, because she was essentially just totally leading the interview. The deputy was allowing her to lead the interview. She was basically asking him questions, and he's answering them, which was mind-blowing.
There was another interview with the other prior trustee. They're having lunch during the interview. The door is open. You can hear her coming in and interrupting. What kind of professionalism is that? That is not. That is, I mean, I can't even believe that we're calling this department a sheriff's department, completely letting her lead these investigations. And furthermore, let me tell you, she made a statement, and she will never, did she really not believe that none of those tapes would ever come out into the public? Because I, for one, am very protective of my children and my family, like most mothers would probably be, and my husband, obviously. But let me tell you, she made a statement in her interview. I believe it was with the BCI interview with Charlie. And she told Charlie that she is the emergency contact for my children at their schools. If you ever make that comment again about acting as though you are an emergency contact with my children at school, I will see you in court.
No.
Don't you ever make a statement like that again, because that is furthest from the truth. You would never, ever be considered an emergency contact.
So why do you think that is? Why do you think that she was essentially...
She was ingratiating these deputies to make it appear as though I am so close to the Macron family. I know everything about them. We're such great friends. Let me tell you, you don't know what my husband and I talked about behind closed doors. And it certainly was not one that we think you're good friends.
Well, as I stated, her interview was very disturbing, and like you said,
yes,
I didn't even know about the eating. Honestly,
I mean that's all I can. That's all I can think of is she was trying to make it appear to the deputies that she's so close to our family, and that she could. I have a statement from her friend that said She is your voice. She is here to help you. She is your voice, and she will help you. She doesn't help me. Don't get involved. Unless you are asked by law enforcement, don't get involved.
And I want to point this out, folks. As I've stated before, I personally have no skin in the game. I mean, I've obviously had conversations. I know Victoria now. I have no skin in this. And I can tell you from a neutral party's perspective, a prior investigator.
Cellular instead of the Wi-Fi, because that's what.
You're unmuted, guys. But the contact that she had relative to investigators who were asking questions were totally absurd. And just the inconsistencies in both her statement as well as the ex-trustee Costello, which I'm hoping to get into here in a bit, their statements were just very inconsistent. Now, I'm not blaming them. I have no evidence at this point stating that they were directly involved with Brian's death, but they are totally inconsistent on many levels of their statements. And we haven't even really gotten into yet, because I'm still waiting for some interviews and some public records relative to these covert cameras, which I don't think we've talked about very much yet. But, I don't know, Victoria, do you want to go into that at this point or leave it at this point?
Bring it up. Bring it up.
There are covert cameras that are installed essentially by a group called Media 144, I believe, and they are out of somewhere in Stark County. I can't remember. Hartville, Ohio. And I've actually attempted to talk to them, and I'll wait for the segment to come up. I actually have it on recording. I initially made a phone call to them, and I didn't even get the words Brian Macron out of my mouth, and they hung up on me. And then I attempted to call right back, and they literally had blocked me within that 10 seconds of them hanging up and me redialing. They had blocked my number. So I called from another number and finally eventually get to speak with the owner, who's extremely defensive when I'm asking these questions relative to these covert cameras being installed. So I know it's come up on social media a little bit, but I think that once we release this, there's going to be a lot of information relative to these cameras. And again, it may or may not have anything to do with Brian's death, but there's so many facets of this case that I'm like coming up with. The deeper I get into this, investigating this, there's just like so many unethical and illegal items that are coming up from the administration at that time. I've never seen anything like this. It's mind-boggling to me that it has not been investigated, by anyone at this point. I don't think that anybody has talked to Media 144 up to this point. As far as Medina County Sheriff's Department goes, I don't think they even followed up with them at this point, which is absurd to me. So the thing is, and I'm hoping to get some interviews. There are some young firefighters that I think were actually explorers at the time, meaning that they were most likely juveniles, and they are being recorded on these covert cameras that had been installed that nobody knew about. And they're like literally dressing and undressing in front of these covert cameras. Now, the cameras were paid for by Lafayette Township. So to me, it's just mind-blowing and mind-boggling. And it really hasn't come up very much at this point. And I'm hoping when I release this that I have some full-blown interviews to share with you guys, because I don't understand at all what's happening with it. But I don't think it's really been talked about much, so I just wanted to bring it up.
Well, it was kept quiet for a reason, obviously, because they didn't want it getting out. And we have the records and the invoices to prove that this was.
And I have spoken with several of the firefighters, and many of them do not wish to be named, so I'm going to respect that. But every one of them eventually knew about these covert cameras, And they were around the time of Brian's disappearance that they discovered them. And each one of them had been threatened independently, essentially, by the ex-township trustees, Linda Bowers and Michael Costello, relative to essentially they would ruin their lives. They would ruin them professionally if they ever told anyone about it. And so the last episode that I just released, I wanted to make certain everybody understood what I was talking about. I wanted to clarify that here today, I wasn't necessarily talking about, again, the death of Brian, but you have these cameras that are videotaping people undress and dress. And
the reason they were doing that, just to give the people a background, is the stations that Lafayette, Station 1 and Station 2, were very old stations. Cinder block walls, there was barely enough room to pull the trucks in. They had some lockers between them, just enough to put their equipment in, their jackets, helmets, fire gear. So there really was no dedicated, there was at the one there was 2 bathrooms, Station 2, which was Chippewa, and then there was 2, but down the hallway, behind the town, like if you were to rent the town hall space, there was 2 bathrooms back there. But if somebody was renting that space and you come back from a fire call, well, obviously you're not going to go in while this event is going on and disrobe in front of everybody in this bathroom. So they just were, told, well, everybody, because when you come off of a fire call, you have hazardous, toxic chemicals, fumes, whatever type of fire you're fighting. It's dangerous. You don't take that home in your car or to your family. That was also the importance of building this new fire station, because they would have a dedicated space that they could shower and clean themselves from the toxic materials before they were to go home to their families. So these cadets, firefighters, men, women, it just was the norm. They would come in and they started changing. Well, for some time, they did not know that covert cameras were there. This did not come out until it was discovered. And then they were accused of maybe, I don't know if it was vandalism or stealing equipment off the truck. Well, first of all, why would firefighters or paramedics be damaging their own equipment that they're going to be riding in?
And I did ask.
Make that statement. Why? To protect yourselves from installing the cameras, to make it sound like it was legit because of theft or vandalism? We had to do this?
And I did ask the firefighters that I've spoken with, and inclusive of the ex-chief, Brad Winters, if they were aware of any type of theft that was going on. And because I did see that statement was made, I think it was in the Medina County Gazette back then, that's why the ex-trustee, Michael Costello, had supposedly suspended this firefighter for tampering with the camera equipment. And they basically stated that they had installed them because of the theft at the fire department. But I mean, and again, maybe the firemen are not going to tell me the truth, but I know Brad pretty well, and I think that he would tell me if there were issues going on back then, and everybody concurred that there was no issues, there were no theft, and Brad even said that apparently some of their systems are actually automatic, like especially like the narcotics and stuff.
They fill those at the hospital, I believe, once they leave. Yeah.
So it's just sort of odd. But there is a segue. There's a question about why was Michael C.'s SUV never investigated for searched or tested for DNA? I think that's an excellent question. And it sort of segues into my Michael C. interview points that I wanted to bring up.
Well, Mike Costello's car, his tires were also slashed, they claimed, and the front grille kicked in. I was called by one of the prior trustees who told me that that had happened a few days after Brian went missing, and they were trying to say, you know, was Mike being targeted, whatever, I don't know. They never investigated. And then a few days later, well, actually, trying to think, it was by the time of the polar bear jump, because I was down there hanging signs, missing signs, and my father-in-law went to speak with him or something, and he couldn't make eye contact with my father-in-law, and he had a question for him and made a statement that he had already gotten rid of that car. He doesn't have that car anymore. So and the night of the movies claimed that he did not know what type of car Brian drove, when, yes, he clearly did. They drove the same exact car. The only difference was one had a luggage rack on top, the other did not.
So in the timeline, and I haven't really talked about it yet, but they're in the timeline. They when he originally talks to the Medina County Sheriff's Department. Now, mind you, his statement, and it's not actually confirmed with anybody else, only Michael Costello states that he's supposed to be at the township for this meeting at 7:45 in the morning. So he gets a call from Rick Evans, who is the maintenance worker who discovers the scene. And originally, Costello tells investigators that at 7:20 he was woken up and he was sleeping on the couch. And so when Rick Evans called him, then fast forward, I don't know, a year or two later, when BCI rolls around and investigates him, he states that he was on his couch in his underwear drinking hot cocoa at 7:20 when Rick Evans called. But my point was, and from what I understand, he lives relatively close, but he's supposed to be at this meeting at 7:45. And to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because and he even talks about how he's going to bring his gun. So if you know you're going to be at this meeting at 7:45, it's important enough for you to consider bringing a firearm with you. You would think that you would be already in motion by 7:20. And it's interesting to me again how, and it could be, maybe it's nothing nefarious. Maybe he just recalled differently, but it's odd the way that he recalled things. One time he's woken up out of a stolen sleep at 7:20, and the next he was drinking hot cocoa on his couch at 7:20. But again, my main premise is, why aren't you already on your way getting ready, essentially, for this meeting that you kept saying was so important at 7:45? And just for the record, I have actually asked both Linda Bowers and Mike Costello several times for their statements on this. And I was even willing to send them my direct questions that I wanted answered, and I was declined by Linda Costello. Or I'm sorry, Linda Bowers. I was declined by Linda Bowers for both of them, which I thought was a little odd, because she answered essentially this fairly long email. She sends me this fairly long email and basically answers for both her and Mike Costello, which again I thought was odd. And then the more I learn about it, but anyways, I just want to make certain that everybody understood that I did ask. I'm not just out here blaspheming them. I did ask for their statement.
The thing is with the stories, a story is the story. It's like when somebody famous passes away, or you remember what you were doing at that moment. Like JFK, I always heard about my mom say things about JFK. What was I doing? The story is the story. You can tell the story today, and you can tell it 2 years from now. It's not going to change. The truth is the truth. And if it should never change. You might forget little bits and pieces here, but over a period of time. However, it was a pretty traumatic day, I think, to say the least, for any of us that live in Lafayette, that Brian was so, such a great guy, and well known to our community, from the schools to the township. people could probably say they remember what they were doing the day Brian passed or went missing, or for both, when they found him. Like I said, the story doesn't change. It is what it is. And for someone's story to change from the day that it happened to 2 years later, you know, that's questionable.
The
I don't
other
understand that.
the other interesting thing I found was, people were actually asking and commenting on the YouTube channel once I played his interview, because I thought it was just me, honestly. But other people mentioned it, so obviously it just wasn't me that thought that he was deflecting. So there's boot prints on the ground. There's bloody boot impressions that are on the ground, and the deputy keeps asking Costello for his boot impression. And he keeps saying, hey, before you leave, I need your boot impression. And Costello keeps spinning the conversation, deflecting every time it's again a point where Costello is running this interview where it should be the other way around. The deputy should be running the interview, and Costello keeps bringing up this. Well, I have this name on my nightstand. It's written down the address. Do you want me to get that? And he literally brings it up almost every time the deputy says, "Hey, I need your boot impression."
Jack Blank, the one of the residents in Lafayette, who's Jack Blank died several years earlier, and used that name that he was getting calls like Brian was from a Jack Blank.
So again, the interesting thing to me was just,
yeah, so they went to ask him for that phone number, and they said, yeah, we'll have to get that from you from your house. It's like, yeah, I think I have it on the nightstand. So he was going to go and get it from the nightstand, and you never heard another thing about it.
and then he never gave his boot impression either, at least that I could find.
No.
So I have, or apparently the MC claimed he didn't notice the bloody boot prints that day. Oop, it went away. Then when BCI interviewed him years later, he said that that's the first thing he noticed. So yeah, I mean, just a lot of inconsistencies with some of these interviews, which we haven't really talked about much at this point. I don't know. It's almost to the point where I want to start releasing 2 videos a week, because I feel like we're not getting fast enough up to speed for where I want to go with this investigation. And I want to point out to everybody, I've gotten a lot of messages for you guys, and I love it. I love the fact that everybody in this county is interacting and attempting to find justice, and I very much appreciate that. So I'm hoping that continues. Where are my original band members? They're pretty quiet.
We're here. We've been in and out though.
We've had some technical problems.
I can comment on, I do find Mike Costello an interesting person in this. You know, he was really close to Brian as far as the timeline goes. You know, he has conflicting interviews, information. He's the only one that also was getting angry resident calls. He's also his car getting vandalized. It just seems really fishy. If the true narrative is that Brian did this all by himself, well then what happens? What was going on with Mike then? Like, you know, with this car getting vandalized, with, you know, his angry resident calls, you know, it almost seems like he's like, you know, contradicting the official quote unquote story, you know?
Yeah, so I was trying to, I had he had the same similar vehicle, and that's actually come up a couple of times with actually a couple of residents that live in Chippewa Lake that they may have seen.
Use him when he would drive by. Like Brian said, people would wave to me and I didn't know who they were, but you know, that's because they drove the same type of car. Brian always wore like collared shirts and 3/4 zips, and so did the other one.
Now, there also was a point of contention with his statement, and I don't know exactly where it comes from, but there's a point of contention that he possibly was not where he stated that night. And again, I don't know if it's extremely relative or not, but there is a point of contention that he may have been drinking at the Village Inn on the 16th. Did you guys hear anything about that, Darren or Rick?
No.
What is the official story that he was at?
I thought he went home. He said he went home, but I believe he lives by himself. So like no one else can really like collaborate. Where like did he actually go home from the movies or?
Well, it was odd too because for someone who claims they didn't know what type of car Brian drove, in his interview he said, "Well, I noticed we parked across the parking lot from one another. That it was very busy." And he said, "I noticed that we parked across the lot and I saw him go out one way and me go out and I went out the other." Well, if you didn't know what kind of car he drove, how'd you know?
Right. And in his interview that I think you played, Scott, he talks about that he was supposed to see Brian Monday. Did you remember that?
Right.
Yes.
And yet, but then when he's interviewed with BCI and stuff, he's like, "Oh, I'm going to see you tomorrow with the angry resident. You're going to be there. Bring your gun." You know, it's like, you know, if you knew that that was happening the day of, why are you trying to say that you weren't going to see him on the 16th?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Right.
So I'm trying to think, the Rick Evans, there were some inconsistencies. I don't know. Do you want me to address those or? There were.
You're talking to
Rick Evans from the maintenance office or maintenance worker that discovered the scene. Basically, he just again.
He said he checks the mail every morning, and he brings the mail in, and checks the traps for Kim or the mouse traps. But that morning, in any of the photos, you don't see where's the mail, where's the paper that he puts on the desk for Kim.
I also thought it was very interesting that his initial interview, basically, he refers to everybody as being brothers and sisters. He loves them, would do anything for them. And then by the time the BCI interview rolls around, he basically downplays the relationship and states that he wasn't close with, Brian. And just some of the comments of the original interview I thought were pretty striking. At one point he even said, well, he thought that Brian offed himself or something of that nature. And I don't know, I have no idea where that even came from or why he would say that. Rick says, yes. Actually, yes, you are correct. Rick does also talk about, he states that those aren't Brian's boot prints, which again, I thought was very important of why they probably should have gotten boot impressions from multiple people, but they didn't.
Right. They also went to one of the Seville officers that Brian sold jewelry to earlier in the day prior to going to the movies. They were going to also take Adam Houck's boot prints, and they even made you can hear it in the interview. He was actually shining his boots when the deputy showed up to talk to him. They said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, I'm actually shining my boots." And he's like, "Yeah, well, we'll need to get a print of those boots before we leave." So, great investigative work.
So Rick and Darren, did you guys? I can't remember. Did you actually interview the jogger, or you just interviewed the witness that was also there that was never interviewed?
Yeah, we talked to Michael Taylor.
Yeah.
And
I talked to Michael Taylor's parents.
To collaborate.
So originally I had a response, and I don't want to violate too much of what they told me, but they did indicate that they were very adamant that they had gone around the lake multiple times the day of Brian's disappearance, They actually went over I asked them to describe sort of where they were. I thought that they just meant that they, were just going in like certain locations, but they were very adamant that they actually went all the way around, even to Westfield Landing. Obviously didn't observe anything. And it goes back again to my biggest thing that I can't get over is from the autopsy. I can't get over the fact of the condition of the body, and it doesn't match essentially anything at this point. So I don't understand where this narrative comes from anybody relative to him either being in the water and or on the shore and then later brought into the water. The narrative doesn't make any sense to me. Which again, if you haven't seen that,
to the hey, Scott, sorry.
yes,
Can you hear me?
yes,
Okay. When you listen to the different interviews with Connie Willis, BCI, and they are discussing the person that Connie Willis saw on Beachside, it seems like they want that to be Brian. That was kind of my impression. Do you have the same impression listening to it? I mean, they know what Brian was wearing at that point when he was pulled out of the lake. But they're accepting that and they want that to be Brian.
yes. It just further made it to me. I just received, and you guys didn't even, I don't even think I've shared it with you, so you couldn't have even known about it. On the BCI records dump that they shared with me, there was literally an audio recording that I didn't even know existed, that they had, apparently the sheriff's department had contacted Connie by phone and recorded the call. And they're literally, their statement is, hey, we heard that you saw Brian that morning. When did you see him? What was he doing? And never actually even asked her, well, how do you know that it was Brian? Or did you even think it was Brian? That wasn't even options that she was given. They literally just pointed the conversation and said, hey, you saw Brian this morning, which I thought was very interesting. So yes, I do believe that they wanted it to be Brian. They made certain, and they never did any follow-up. They never said, well, how big was the person? How tall was the person? How fat was the person? What was the person wearing? They never even asked in that initial interview, but they made certain to say, hey, we understood that you saw Brian that morning. So,
well, they made the statement that he wore a hoodie. So I remember Cartwright asking me, does Brian own hoodies? I looked at him, I said, Brian would never wear a hoodie, ever. You will never see Brian in a hoodie. He doesn't own them. They're not here. He does not wear hoodies. Never has. So then for them to advance that and say, hey, you saw Brian that morning and he had a hoodie on. No, that's not Brian, but.
and again, I think
we have two people.
Words in her mouth. Is that, they're trying to, make her say, oh yeah, that's him. No, they never really thoroughly even interviewed her.
So excellent question. It was asked, what was he dressed in when he was found? Victoria, can you handle it? Can you take that or?
He was in his jeans, a blue and white button-down shirt, and a gray, the gray sweater, V-neck sweater. He was not in a 3/4 zip that someone gave to law enforcement when he went missing. I never ever gave them any information. They never asked me. I mean, if you're going to get accurate information, try to go to the driver's license info. It wasn't even pulled off a driver's license through the state of Ohio. They were doing a weight challenge. Rick Evans, Brian, and one of the other employees at the maintenance department. And all their height and weights were here, written down. Accurate height, or accurate weight, I said. Not height, but the accurate weight for their weight loss challenge that they used to do every year around that time. So that, even that was accurate because he had them written down on a piece of paper here. But they never came to me and asked. Never. Not one law enforcement officer asked me. So I would like to know where they got that information from, because it was all wrong.
And following up, Darren, I think you were bringing this up because I think that's also important, just because of the question that was asked. The two witnesses that we're aware of essentially describe the person similar at some point. I think it took Connie, her interview with BCI maybe, and the interview with the gentleman that you guys conducted. But I mean, give us a little insight on that, because it didn't appear to be Brian, either one of them described.
Yeah, so like Michael Taylor reached out to us, and we recorded him. And he describes Brian does not describe Brian. He describes this guy in a hoodie and shorts, close to the car. The big difference between the BCI interview with Connie and Michael Taylor, because they both described the hood up. Now, Connie does not say anything about shorts, just said not dressed for the weather. But Connie describes him going north on Beachside Drive, kind of close to Stevens, just north of Stevens' house. And Michael Taylor sees him going south towards like private property, back where the private boat launch ramp is, kind of close to basketball court there. Right in that area is where Michael Taylor sees this person. Now, a question I've got is Steven's camera. Do you have any of that stuff come across, the actual video footage? Because wouldn't that have picked up if Brian got out of his car and walked to the inlet?
Wait, so to answer your question, no, I don't have it. I don't have it yet. Although I think I don't know if our producer has it or not. But as from what I am told, and again, I don't have it. I haven't seen it. I'm told that it's extremely grainy, that they can barely make out the purported Brian's car. Because that was my question. Hey, I want to see this video, because if it shows Brian's car pass, again, it's like 3 minutes. He goes down a minute and a half, comes back a minute and a half. And I'm like, well, if you see that, then why don't you see these people? I mean, this person that everybody keeps describing, wouldn't you see them? And, but I don't have the video yet. But I'm told that you might not be able to see anybody anyways. And again, it's not documented by the sheriff's department. Again, generally when you're looking at something from a camera, you do a timeline. Okay, at this time you see this, you see a car. At this time, you see this car going this way. You see a person, they're going this way. And there's no timeline. So there's nothing written, documented that I've seen. And again, I haven't gotten to see the video yet. Have you seen it, Victoria, or?
What's that?
Have you seen the video from Beachside?
Which is Beachside? Which road? Is that
it's
the Village Inn?
No, that's basically the road that is where Brian's car is parked, but further down,
No.
there's a house, and supposedly they have video, and that's what.
Is that the one that the video you did and you drove down that road?
That's what the
Beachside?
Yeah, the sheriff's department's indicated.
Right on the beach.
I think it was around. I want to say I'm going to probably get this wrong. Either 6:30 or 7:30. The sheriff's department says that they see the car going north, and then a minute and a half later, the car goes south. But that's from that video that they're making this statement. Have you seen this video at all, or?
No.
I mean, I would like to see it if anybody has it. I
thought you meant the one you were recreating. The day
Yes.
you did
Yeah.
YouTube, you were recreate. That's Beachside.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Word Beachside. It's the beach, the one that runs across the bay. No. Have I seen that? No. No, because when Charlie made the statement that he saw Brian's car, I'm thinking, where? Because I watched the video from the one that was by Village Inn. And they claim, and I was thinking that it went north or went down towards the lake and then back up. And I thought, I don't see that in that video. I see a car go down, but I never see a car come back up. And I don't even know, you can hardly make out that video by the Village Inn whose car it is.
And I just
Make and model, I should say.
and I attempted to just use AI. Again, I try to use AI for a lot of things on this case, just to see if AI could figure
Yeah.
out what kind of vehicle it was. And the description, it basically stated that it could be Brian's vehicle, and then there were other vehicles that it possibly could be, but there was no definitiveness, again, one way or the other, whether it was Brian's vehicle or not. It's, again, sort of, I don't know, do we have, I don't know if you do you have that handy there, Miss Producer? Or?
Producer,
What are you asking for?
what is it you need?
I didn't know if she knew where the video was of the supposed car.
The beachside video or the one by the Village Inn.
I can check. I don't know that I ever.
We'll check.
And we have somebody also commenting relative to Victoria never getting to identify the body. But from what she could tell, those boots that were on him looked like they were way too big for him. Is that?
Huge. Huge.
Tightened and-
They were very tightened, really tight, and very long.
So that also, I don't want to make, I want to make certain that we touch on that also. The vehicle was found in a position essentially where deputies even noted, the one thing that they documented was that the fact that they didn't feel that it could be, the seat placement couldn't be where Brian was driving the vehicle. They thought that the seat was pushed up very far. Again, they didn't measure it. I wish they would have measured it, the distance. But at least they noted that they didn't think that it was Brian that was actually driving the vehicle. I thought that was an important thing to note. And I also have somebody
Scott.
talking. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry if I'm interrupting, but when you're talking about the vehicle, I would like your opinion, as an investigator who's been to crime scenes and things like that. You've probably seen the pictures inside of the township office where there's a lot of blood. And then some of the photos from the car, there's only tiny amounts of blood inside of the vehicle. Do you find that odd, or is that kind of consistent with how this, is there a logical explanation?
I mean, there could be a lot of explanations for it. I don't, but I do find it somewhat odd, just in the fact that it's either from the wounds sealing up, the wounds being transferred to other material like clothing, or the blood. Sorry, the blood transferring to the clothing instead of dropping, or there could have been that much blood loss from point A to the car. That's a possibility. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities, but yeah, I think it's something extremely worth noting. The fact that there wasn't much blood in the vehicle. There were also, their theory is that he gets out of the vehicle, which I find, I legitimately try to look at it from both angles. I try to look at it, okay, if he did this himself, or if somebody did this to him, and if he did it himself, I find it very hard for it to account that there's no blood. You would have drops, gravity, the blood falls, it drops. I'm not a blood pattern expert by any means. I'm going to tell you what I'm good at and what I'm not. I'm not a blood pattern expert, but you're still going to see blood drops essentially if he's, unless he stopped bleeding at that point. But there's no blood around his car whatsoever. I mean, and you can see on the ground they're photographing. You don't observe anything, and so yeah, I find it extremely odd that there's like no blood. There's very little blood in the car. And there's no blood drops on the outside of the car. So if he did do it himself, where's the blood? Where did he go? I mean, you theoretically would be able to follow wherever he went, even though it may not be dropping consistently. You're going to have some sort of a trail, and so.
Dear bells.
So I find that odd. Did that answer the
They
question? I'm
also
sorry.
brought down a dog down there. There's a picture of a deputy with the dog, and he would have picked up a scent. He was pulling more towards the deputy than he was pulling towards the car or around the car.
Somebody had also commented talking about, we're going back a bit to the Lafayette Township Administration Hall, the fact that it was cleaned up so quickly. And again, I'm sort of like behind the 8 ball on it because I'm not exactly, it's not documented. Generally, when a crime scene is released, it's documented that it's released. And there's no documentation stating when the crime scene was released. I don't know if it was proper. I don't know if the township administration had the authority to clean that up. And is that something that either anybody, Victoria, Darren, or Rick, do you guys know? Did they just do that on their own, or did they have the authority of the sheriff's department to clean that scene up?
We're letting everybody come in and view the crime scene. She made a statement.
I guess the real question is, did they ever declare
to me that she had to go down there because the police told her she had to come down and look for a secret note? I mean, I think that's what law enforcement is for. Law enforcement would probably say, I don't know, Scott, did you guys, like, when you go into a crime scene, do you say, okay, we need your laptops, we need your computer passwords, we need login IDs, whatever it is that we search this site of everything that is in this building, and why is anybody else other than law enforcement allowed to be in that building looking for anything? Or they should be given keys, they should be given the passwords of all the employees that work there and all their laptops. And why are you letting employees of the township come in and contaminate a crime scene?
No, you're absolutely correct. And I mean, I think it's also important to note that the photographs and I'm still not, the reports indicate the BCI processed the scene. And again, full disclosure, I just got the records on Friday, I think Thursday or Friday, and I haven't gotten through them. One of the things that I was looking for was, did BCI actually process the township administration building? Because everybody says that they did. I've had certain people tell me that there were sedans with BCI investigators. I've had others state that they actually saw a BCI truck.
There was no BCI truck there that I'm aware of. I had friends drive past the site at numerous times. They said that it was never there. They said they came in plain marked cars. That's what I was told by the deputies. And they never roped it off. And like I said, I looked at all I believe it's called the CAD reports of where the deputies are at every point. They radio in to dispatch of their locations, and everybody was popping in, popping out, going in, coming out. Yeah.
And it was never photographed either. I thought that was very odd. It was, there's four sides of a building, and three sides in this case were photographed, not the fourth. And I just actually also became aware that apparently there was some sort of access road that was behind the township that almost went parallel with the township building. And everybody kept referring to a back door, and I thought that they meant the back side door. And here there is like literally a back door at the township hall that is running essentially parallel with this access road, this gravel access road that used to be down there. Somebody's asking about, I thought you wanted to interview me. I'm not certain who that is, but absolutely. I don't know if, I'm assuming you probably don't want to come on right now, or you're more than welcome to if you want to, or please contact me. I'm not certain who that is.
Somebody.
So they're asking, were any of Brian's coworkers' cellular phones ever confiscated to be searched for evidence? You want to take that, or?
I believe just co-workers as township trustees, or
I'm assuming that's what they're stating. They're Brian's coworkers. So I'm
Costello's
assuming.
was, as far as I know, there's
Only to look up for the Jack Blank call, though.
what's that?
They only got his calls just to look for the Jack Blank call.
They only got his information to look for the Jack Blank calls.
I think did they?
I do not believe Linda Bowers was ever subpoenaed.
And we do have his calls.
Mr. Costello's was correct.
Pardon me?
His Mr. Costello's records were subpoenaed, were they, or am I misthinking? Okay.
Yes, but we don't have any
But-
information from December 16th, that day the follow-up.
Yeah, we don't have anything from the 16th, December 16th. They
It's
were,
corrupt.
yeah, it's corrupt,
We have everything before and after.
Before and after. but not that day.
And they just confirmed they're talking about, yes, they're talking about the township. And when you mean corrupt, you're talking about the file, right? Is that what you mean, or?
Yes.
Okay. And I have noticed, and again, sometimes I'm a Mac person. So some of these files that I have, they're inaccessible to me. And I don't know if it's because it's Mac versus PC.
Yeah, it's the Apple, yeah.
I was having issues with the Village Inn video, but I finally overcame that. I finally figured out how to get around that, but that took me a while to get the
Yeah, I
video to
had
work.
to use a friend's laptop for that.
So did we lose Darren and Rick again, or?
I see him.
We're still there.
Are we here?
Darren, you had some questions. Did you want me to? Do you remind you of, or?
Sure.
I think you were talking about, or did we discuss? Maybe we already discussed this. I'm sorry. The fact of the arrival times of the video. Did we already discuss that?
I know Maria put a little thing in the bottom. I don't know if we actually like covered like, because we don't, you mean like we don't have the arrival of them coming in? Like who
Correct.
arrived when on scene, what time?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have, as far as the deputies,
You
Or
you mean-
even just like when Rick got the,
the deputies, the day that, is that what?
Yeah, I mean, do you have a sheet like the arrival times? You mean from the CAD? Is that what you're
Yes.
talking about, Victoria?
Mm-hmm.
I guess I was mainly asking, or thought that it was odd that, again, that the video stops at 7:02.
Oh,
And-
right.
And Mr. Evans isn't exactly clear himself what time that he arrived. Initially, I think he said 7:02. Then it went from 7:02 to maybe 7:12, maybe 7:22, I think. So it's
Well,
just
we also have those cameras that we found out about as well. We have a deputy that cleaned out his vehicle a day or two prior, is what the sheriff's department said. And he cleaned out his vehicle at the fire station. That fire station garbage, not knowing what was in it, they just kind of took it out of the garbage, bundled it up, threw it in the dumpster, and he cleaned out a knife and business cards from his cruiser on, he said, the passenger side, behind the passenger seat. So he had cleaned that out, and they never saved any of that as well as evidence. And then we
So
found
the-
out about the cameras. So if the deputy did throw that out, I believe they said it was Thursday, the day before. And if the deputy did clean that out and there were cameras there, where's the video from those cameras? Those cameras, that video was not released until December 18th.
and there's also just so everybody has an
They
idea.
didn't tell them about it till the 18th. They were not notified. The Medina County Sheriffs were not notified of that video until the 18th.
There's also some conversations from firefighters that are telling me about an external camera that was on the, I think they were referring to it as the Schultz shed or some sort of garage structure that is looking at the fueling station, which may have gotten a view of the front door of the administration. And everybody's pretty persistent that there was a camera there. Now, we don't know whether or not it was live or not. And I did have a conversation, somewhat of a conversation yesterday with one of the firefighters who stated that he had more information, but I need to follow back up. I don't know. But they're all very adamant that there was a camera that was pointed at the fueling station, which, to my knowledge, there's no video that was pulled from that. But there are like times that Cartwright in his reports, he basically states that he views camera footage and deems it unworthy, and so he doesn't do anything with it. Doesn't pull the video, and he doesn't even describe what's on the video in his written reports, which I thought was I don't know, very ironic.
Scott, a question for you. When you go to a crime scene, wouldn't a basic question be, are there cameras here? Does anybody have camera?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You would also do generally what would be referred to as
101.
you would do what's referred to as an area canvas, which you would go beyond. And I've had messages from residents of Lafayette Township who stated, "Hey, we've lived here since that time, and nobody has contacted us one time." And that's general procedure. It's called area canvas. You go outside of the crime scene and you ask, "Hey, did you hear or see anything last night? Do you have a camera system in your house or a camera system anywhere? Do you know of any cameras that are around here?" And again, there may not have been, but I don't even think it was ever asked. It was never documented, at least. And there's an old saying in law enforcement: if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So it's frustrating that all of these things are not documented. Maybe they did ask people. Maybe they did do an area canvas, but nothing was ever documented stating that they did. So it leads people to believe that it wasn't. They took no pictures or searches of other buildings on the property or pictures of behind the building. Yes, they essentially just did they took photos of essentially three sides of the building.
Well,
and at that,
Brian being a veteran as well, I had veteran agencies contacting me. They're certified agencies. They do search and rescue. They have cadaver dogs. They have special boats. Dogs that are not drug sniffing dogs that Medina Sheriff brought, but they are cadaver dogs. They can smell skin cells on the top of the water. They can, find somebody in the woods. So they contacted me and I put them in contact with Medina Sheriff's Office. They're a certified agency. Numerous people have used them. That was free of charge. And Medina County Sheriff's Office said, "No, you are not welcome here." They had a whole grid pattern search. They said they tried contacting them twice, and finally on New Year's Day, they said they placed the call back to Sheriff's Office and said, "We will be there on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day doing our search." And they said they finally called them back on that return call and said, "Do not come here. You're not welcome."
And I think I recognized one of the teams, the cadaver team. We actually used that same team on the Michael Madison case in East Cleveland, and they were actually superb dogs. They ended up locating another victim that we probably never would have even known about. So yeah, their dogs are like awesome, and I have no idea why the sheriff's department would turn down anybody that wanted to assist. I have no idea.
I also had another friend call me. They said they do sonar. They do sonar in Lake Erie and that, and they're very highly skilled, highly trained. They also offered assistance with no cost to myself or the township. And again, turned down. They said, no, you're not welcome.
And there was also frustration, just so everybody knows, all the firefighters apparently offered their assistance also, and they were turned down as well. And I sort of, and I don't want to put them out there at this point, but during my interview, I mean, he basically made certain that I was correct. They actually had infrared equipment that they use for like heat sources. Fire department, a lot of times in East Cleveland, we would call it out. Fire department, if we were looking for somebody, because again, they have equipment. Essentially, the equipment is supposed to be looking for a fire, but it's looking for heat sources. And they had that equipment in Lafayette Fire Department. They also had UTVs, four-wheelers. They had vehicles that could go around the lake essentially and do an actual cohesive search. And apparently they were also turned down. So I have no idea why. I don't understand. In law enforcement, you want the public's help. You want as much assistance as you possibly can get. Yeah.
All hands on deck.
And okay, so I'm being asked if I gotten any pushbacks on other cases like I have with this case. So I was asked this earlier. No, I don't think on the Don Pasella case. That's a case that I did also, which came down to some very corrupt prosecutors from Cuyahoga County being involved. I was actually threatened with, they were one of the ex-prosecutors that had been brought up on disciplinary. He actually was trying to get me criminal charges against me for talking. He was trying to use some sort of, I can't remember what the law was, basically like telephone harassment. He was, so thankfully, the prosecutor from Rocky River, I think it was, or Westlake, basically laughed at him, rightfully so. But other than that, no, I have not gotten any pushback like I have gotten about this case, which is, again, slightly disturbing. You would think that people would want to help, that people would want to know the truth. And I've stated from the onset, I believe I'm objective, and you're more than welcome. Anybody who feels that I'm not objective, you're more than welcome to comment or send me messages privately. If you don't think that I am being objective, I have no skin in this game, and I think that I've been completely objective up to this point. And no, I've never received this much pushback from anybody on any type of case like this whatsoever. To answer the question. Somebody was asking who told them that they weren't welcome to the searches. Do you know specifically, Victoria, or
the agency?
Somebody asked who told them that they weren't welcome.
Cartwright. I'm pretty sure it was Cartwright, because I told him. I said, I have this guy that contacted me. He wants to do the search, and he can't get in touch with you. You guys aren't returning the calls. So as far as I know, I'm pretty sure it was Cartwright.
All right. I'm trying to think. Is there any Miss Producer? I mean, I don't. I'll be honest. I was hoping that there would be some more questions. Is there anything that we're forgetting to touch on? As far as glaring inconsistencies up to this point that we've talked about?
I don't think so. I think you touched on it for the
I'm going through my list. I apologize.
Hey, Scott,
Yes.
I got a question for you. Have you ever had a knife in the back of your police cruiser?
That's a tricky question. Yes, I actually have, and it was my fault for failure to search after somebody got out of the back of my cruiser. But no, generally you're not supposed to have a knife in the back of your cruiser.
So as an officer of the law, were you ever supposed to clean out your car other than at the police station?
Yeah. So actually, when that occurs, you actually do what's called a property found report. So you would indicate, hey, I was checking my cruiser. and I discovered this. And so the hope is that you are checking your cruiser after every person that you put in the back of your cruiser, and then you're able to sort of narrow down possibly where these articles of drugs or knives or whatever came from. And we actually, when I first started, we actually had bosses, supervisors that would literally put stuff in your car to see whether or not you are, because I mean, it was our policy and procedure that we needed, when we went out to our vehicle, that we needed to check our vehicle for contraband. And we would literally have supervisors plant stuff in our cruisers to see whether or not we would find it. Because again, the first thing that you have to do when you find something is you have to do a property found report. So obviously, if I'm a supervisor and I go put something in one of my subordinates' cars and they're not coming in and doing a report, then obviously there's an issue. So to answer your question, yes, I have had it, and you are supposed to do a property found report, essentially
But you wouldn't
indicating.
clean it out necessarily like at the local restaurant and throw it in
No,
the
no,
trash.
no. It would be logged in
Well-
as. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
When we're talking about inconsistencies though with knives at the crime scene, what about the painter that we talked about? We interviewed him on our podcast. He was called in to repaint the office, and there were still deputies inside going through evidence, and he saw them walk out with was it one or two knives?
He said plural. He had knives.
They found knives at the scene.
Yeah, I mean,
They never got entered into
and again, the whole idea is that when you find evidence at the scene, it needs to be documented. It could be a butter knife. It may not be consistent with the type of wound that you're looking for, but it still needs to be photographed and documented in a report stating, "Hey, I found this butter knife." Again, this is just like police 101, and it's so frustrating, honestly. I'm not the kind of person, honestly, that trash talks other law enforcement agencies. It's generally not what I do. But it's so hard to say anything nice about this investigation because it boggles my mind. And I've said this before. I can't remember who I was just talking to. Okay, we're all human. Investigators are human. We all make some mistakes. We may not have the best day. We may not have the best interview. We should have asked better questions or a different type of questions. But it's like every single thing in this investigation is just botched. And when I say botched, I mean botched. Everything is just botched. So yes, if you find a bunch of knives on scene, even if the defense is, well, hey, they're not consistent with the wounds, it still should have been documented. It still should have been photographed. It still should have been logged in evidence. And to go back real quick, just on like you wouldn't, Victoria, you would not throw it out in a dumpster. If I found a knife in the back of my car, it would be logged into property. It would be logged into evidence, essentially. It would be it's not evidence. We would maintain different evidence and property, but it would still be logged in at the police department. Hey, this is found property, and this is where it's at. We would indicate, hey, I found this in the back of my car. Shouldn't have been here, and it's now found property, and I'm putting it in the found property evidence storage. So yes, you don't simply just drive up and start throwing everything out of your cruiser in a dumpster. No, that's not what should happen. There was a question. Was there any other information pertaining to? Oh, sorry.
You can take it.
Okay. Was there any other information pertaining to Brian's phone ping that was near Kennard Road that night when he went missing, and the odd phone calls Rick Evans had received from someone anonymous? Does anybody have a better? I don't know. Victoria or Darren or Rick probably would be more familiar with the pings. I know we were talking about it, Darren, before.
Well, we just had that based on what was Brian's cell phone, the pings, but they never. Again, I kept asking, did you get the cell tower dumps? Did you get, I mean, I'm not an investigator, and I know this shit. Like, come on.
Victoria, I have to stop you. I don't know if my parents were watching this or not. Okay. When this came up originally in 2016, I don't remember what position I was in. I think I was the detective bureau commander at the time, and this was all over the place. So my mom had just inquired with me, "Hey, did you hear about this trustee missing? Blah blah blah." And the first thing I said, "Well, that should be very easy to solve because all you have to do is a cell phone dump because Lafayette Township is rural. It's not, there's not going to be a ton of cell phones on between, midnight and 6 o'clock in the morning in Lafayette Township." So I said to her, and maybe I'm the one that vexed it, Victoria, I'm sorry. Because I said, this should be easy to solve because they should be able to do a cell phone dump and figure out where everybody was.
Yeah.
And it was never done. I have no idea why.
Like he wouldn't even say. I honestly, I don't think he knows what that is. I don't think he knows or how to do it. And again, then when their agencies are coming in to help you, let them help you.
And why?
There was one point in the investigation that they had said that Cartwright told me that they got a call from. Oh, it was, I think, it was, let me think, it was the city of Northfield. And he said, well, we may have seen Brian, the police over there may have seen Brian in a storefront. Do you know why he would be over there or anything? Was it like he a gambler, or I think it was like a liquor store or something. So right away, I got on the phone and I called over there and I said, I called the police department and I said, hey, my husband's missing. We got word that maybe he was over by a liquor store. Is there one over there? So they told me, and then I got off the phone and I was going to call that. Cartwright called me. And then I actually called, they said another store, it was over by Fairview Park. He goes, no, we didn't mean Northfield, we said Fairview Park. So I got on that. I got on and I called Fairview Park Police Station and I asked them over there, do you have a liquor store over here? My husband may have been seen over here. Do you know Cartwright called me and said, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you calling all these departments? I said, because you're not calling them, so I'm going to call them because I'm looking for my husband. He didn't have anything to say about it. So I honestly, like, if a cell tower dump, like, when there's other outside agencies trying to help you, why wouldn't you take the help? It's okay that you might not know certain things, or you might not be as, well, we found out he's not very versed in homicide work based on no professional experience, but why would you turn down agencies then?
And there's one thing I just want to clarify with everybody. Obviously, Victoria has her position. I have my position. I think everybody, if anybody walks away from tonight, takes away one thing, right? In any type of case like this, it's investigated as a homicide until it's proven otherwise. And the fact that they didn't investigate, and in fact, the fact that it isn't proven otherwise at this point, it still should be being investigated as a homicide. So I know that there are a different sect of people that say, oh, he did it to himself. That's fine. They have that opinion. But again, it still should be being investigated as a homicide. And that's the main issue that we're here at today, is it never was. And so now you're behind the eight ball because of things that should have been done originally. And I had just talked to you earlier, Victoria, about this interview that I found where they're calling, I can't remember what convenience store it was. They're more worried about Paul Hartman identifying himself as a police officer. That's their entire premise of the call. It's not what was going on with Brian or what did they know about Brian. Their entire premise of the interview is, well, did he identify himself as a police officer? Because if he identified himself as a police officer, then that's impersonation. That was their entire premise of the phone call. It wasn't about was Brian there? Did Brian, did this guy have anything to offer about it? It was, I don't know. They were so worried about someone else doing their job when they weren't doing their job, that they actually put more effort into that type of investigation than actually looking. But
Right.
and the question about the bloody towel, maybe that was before. I thought we answered it, but my interviews, there was a bloody towel that's discovered in the dumpster. It's female DNA. To my knowledge, it's never been identified. And I did ask the firefighters, and I just specifically also asked April Winters, who I believe was one of the EMS supervisors, I believe. And I said, well, is that something, hey, did you guys do it? I mean, is that something that could have happened? And obviously she said, well, I can't say what other people may or may have not done. But she said it didn't make a lot of sense to her because there was a tub for bloodborne, what am I looking for? Hazmat material that was inside the fire station. So essentially, they would pull the ambulance in and they would clean the ambulance and it would go into this tub for hazmat materials. And her position was, well, it would be sort of more work for somebody to have to walk out to the dumpster and throw it out there, then why wouldn't they have just thrown it in the hazmat area? And, that's right next to the ambulance, which sort of makes sense. So I think Medina County originally was talking about, hey, this is some careless EMS worker that threw this bloody towel in here. That was the story that they were going with. And, just makes, and again, it could be, that could be, but it does make more sense.
I mean, that's where the cameras come into play.
Yes.
So let's look at the cameras because they were inside. There were cameras inside by the, not only by the trucks, but there were also cameras inside where there's a small kitchen at Fire Station 1. There were cameras there as well. And those cameras were not disclosed to law enforcement until the 18th. So had someone thrown it out, even a day or two prior, then you refer to the video from the day or two prior, say we need every video from beginning on Monday through Sunday. And I mean, that's how you rule that out. If it has nothing to do with it, you're not going to keep it as evidence, then you need to prove otherwise.
So somebody's talking.
Prove that.
So how come in one of the interviews, the interviewer said it was going to public Ebola was already out, and then we didn't hear anything. So that's a good question. So basically, and I think that was with Linda Bowers. Linda Bowers basically was stating, hey, what can I have all these people calling me. What can I tell these people? And the investigator basically said, well, hey, it's we've already sent bolos out, which are on leads. Leads are, be on the lookout, notices that go across leads. And probably in 2016, I think the cars had MDTs or computers inside their car. So like all those bolos go out to essentially any law enforcement agency in whatever region the bolo, you can push the bolo out statewide, you can push it out county-wide, whatever you want. But yeah, so the excellent question though, the interviewer states, hey, well, this is already public knowledge. Everybody is already going to know about this. But great question. Why didn't they put it out to the public? You would think at a minimum, once they found Brian's car in Chippewa Lake, you think at a minimum they would have had a press conference and said, hey, does anybody from Chippewa Lake know anything about this car? At a minimum, you would think that was would have happened, but it didn't. And I don't know why. So I'm sorry I couldn't answer your question. I don't know why.
Brian also was never part of the missing persons database.
NamUs?
NamUs.
Yeah.
I called them, contacted them directly. They have no record of him being in NamUs.
So there, a question to you, Darren and Rick. Didn't the invisible ships touch on an old barn and how close it was to the township hall? Wasn't there speculation Brian might have been taken there?
Yeah, that did come up. Swinehart did say that he searched that that's the barn that's on the park property close to Ballish Road, I believe is what they're referencing. I'm trying to think of where we got the information that possibly he got taken there.
Multiple people called in off the record to tell us that. I don't know if we ever got anyone to say it on the record, but that was a popular theory.
I mean, it's close to the township, Paul.
I think there was initially speculation because Miss Linda Bowers brings up in an interview right off the rip talking about vacant or some sort. I don't know. I don't know if she said barn or
there was a barn on her property.
Something about the fire department used it for burns or something.
Fire department could use it for burns, but she wanted.
there.
She said Brian had been there. Maybe he was there. Again,
So I don't.
creating false information, and then she said, "Oh yeah, you can come in and burn it down."
So I don't know if that's why maybe you got the tips. I don't. Her initial interview, she was talking about this barn or this property. So I'm not sure if that's where that came from or. Somebody asked, how can they conduct an interview and expect to get any information when other possible suspects are in the building and can hear you? Yes, excellent question. And I think I brought up on my episode, I didn't even realize that they were interviewing them on the scene. And that's just like not heard of. Again, we actually had a mobile commands unit that we would roll out. And so if we were on a scene and we wanted to conduct interviews, it was fully recorded inside the mobile command. And so we would interview people in the mobile command center. But yeah, to Victoria's point, they're reintroducing these people. Yes, they were already on scene initially, but they're reintroducing these people, bringing them back into the scene to interview them. It blew my mind.
I listening to the interviews, they said, "Oh, where is everybody? Oh, well, they're outside in the car. They're all warming up." And okay, could you tell that next person to come in? They're all inside the cars together.
Somebody.
I just know from being in professional business careers and banking, and the first thing you do is you separate everyone. Everyone gets separated. They all get a piece of paper. They start writing things down.
Somebody asked, wasn't it brought up at some point that Brian and Patrolman Hooks were supposed to meet up over jewelry at some point around this time period as well?
Yeah, I'm answering that now.
We're answering it.
I'm sorry?
I just
It's-
typed the response.
It's being responded to.
Oh, okay. Somebody just sent me a message on. Oh, trying to get it. So somebody had just followed up, sent me a message stating that there's a house on Ballas Road directly across the lake from where he was found. I believe there's an exterior garage and a garage attached to the house. Was it ever looked at? And no, I don't believe so. Again, not that it's documented. There's no area canvas at the lake either. And I've had residents.
I even tried to search some of these places. I went down to some barn off of, I don't know. There was some abandoned, it looked like an abandoned house. I was going to drive up the driveway and I thought, I better not. Like, I'm by myself. Somebody could come out and, say, what are you doing on my property? And I didn't want to, but there were numerous places I would drive by and look and ask the deputies, did you ever go search that? Did you ever go search that? And then they said, well, we did get a call for somebody heard like dogs barking or coyotes or something, but we didn't find anything. So.
They're asking something about Lafayette. They're talking about this house again. They're saying Lafayette rents it for parties. Does anybody know anything about that? this person's asking about a house on Ballast Road directly across the lake from where he was found. I believe there's an exterior garage and a garage attached to the house.
It's a house or part of the park? There's a park building there that you can rent, but it's an actual house that Lafayette rents?
I'm waiting to see if they respond. But initially, they said it's a house on Ballast Road directly across from the lake.
Is that the one that they were complaining about, like
They're stating that they rented it themselves for a birthday party. Supposedly the key was kept at the town hall.
Wow, I don't know. Maybe they could private message or.
All right. Oh boy. That's weird. Okay. I'm sorry. Somebody responded. I'm getting lost. I'm not used to having a producer, so I'm seeing all these responses getting confused. Somebody asked, is there any accountability here? No, doesn't appear to be. And again, this is why in full disclosure, again, I worked with Sheriff Grice prior at Put in Bay. I would hope that he would do the right thing here. And again, it doesn't take very much effort to do the right thing. And look at this case. Doesn't require very much at all. And again, even if you don't have the manpower, you can ask for assistance from other agencies. But, all right.
So Scott, quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So do you feel like after hearing like the different interviews, do you feel like the lake area was searched well or not? Like, it's kind of like polarizing when I hear people talk about it. So what's your thoughts? Do you think like it's conclusive that Brian wasn't there? And don't use the autopsy, just in general of how much you hear of it was searched. Do you feel like it was conclusive that Brian wasn't there, or inconclusive they didn't search it enough?
So I rely on a lot of the interviews from the Rangers, who seem to be very adamant about their searching efforts. So to answer your question, I mean, I have private residents that tell me that they were also looking for Brian during those times. I would like to think that it's highly likely that he would have been found if he was there. But I mean, there's always that possibility that he's at some spot where nobody went and looked. I mean, that's still a possible solution, or not solution, a possibility. But again, I keep bringing myself back to the autopsy. I don't think he was there. I mean, there's nothing that shows in the autopsy. He would have had very specific marks. I mean, I'm trying to curtail my words here. Victoria's with us. But his body would have been eaten by animals at the minimal. I don't think he was out on the shore. If he's in the water, he's going to have all sorts of different emaciation, which is where I mean, everybody has seen a small portion of emaciation. I'm sure you get out of a hot tub or a bathtub after soaking for so long, and your hands are, very distorted. They're emaciated. That's what emaciation is. So if he's in the lake for any amount of time, he's going to be emaciated. Then you have this whole vertical floating that makes absolutely no sense to me. And I'm trying to be objective because I would like to lean one way or the other and continue to investigate in that fashion. And I can't do it at this point. There's nothing to indicate how he got there. And I think that's probably the most disturbing thing to me. So people can talk about, I think people may have gotten frustrated with how much in depth I went on the autopsy reports, the condition of his body, how he was found, how he was floating. I think people are getting a little frustrated with me, and I apologize, because I think that's the most critical thing that I can't overcome. You can go through in all the interviews. You can go through all the photographs. You can go through all the video that you want. To me, it's somewhat secondary, because you can't explain. If your theory is, from the Medina County Sheriff's Department, if your theory is that this is self-inflicted, explain to me how he got there. Explain to me how his body was in the condition that it was, because it was almost pristine. It was 67 days, 68, depending on when you count, if it's missing or whatever. But 67 days he's missing, and his body is almost pristine. To me, you can't. That's something you just can't explain away. And it's almost like he was in a controlled environment during those 67 days. Is the only thing. And again, I was just asked about chicken parm. That's the reason I'm sorry. My wife was talking about dinner, but the whole thing is you can't explain away how he was found. You can't explain how he got there, and because of that, this case should be open. This case should have never been closed. Yes, it would have made more sense that he was kept somewhere until the lake started to thaw. Absolutely. I think he was, again, in a controlled environment. I don't think there's any evidence to show that people have theorized a freezer. Generally, there is crystallization that happens in blood when someone is frozen for any amount of time. His body doesn't reflect that, at least it's not notated. But it doesn't discount the fact that maybe the freezer's kept at above freezing temperature. Maybe it's kept at 33, 34 degrees. And I firmly believe that his body was in a controlled environment for 67 days. Somebody's asking about this red pickup. I recall hearing about a red pickup truck that was seen at the farm. Oh boy. Thank you. 162 in Ryan that was filled with lime. Is it possible Brian's body could have been kept? And I'm sorry, I'm not a fast enough reader. Kept in the lime. Lime can delay decomp. No. Yes, lime can slow down decomposition, but generally, generally you would have some sort of residue of the lime. I'm not saying that it's not possible. I would say it's less likely, just because there would be residue of the lime somehow on his body. But yeah, it is possible.
So your theory, Scott, that he was kept in a controlled environment, are you saying that is your theory? And
right
that
now.
He wasn't in the lake
right now
until
yes.
ultimately discovered?
Yes, right now that is my
so
theory.
that has to be murder.
Yes. At least, wow. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be murder to be technical. It could be some sort of negligence. I don't want to tie it down. I don't want people to say, oh, he's talking out the side of his head here. He doesn't know, because there are different other theories that could have happened. It could have been a negligent, could have been an accident. But yes, if someone is hiding a body and keeping it in a controlled condition, there's a reason that they're doing that. And again, I hope people that are much more learned than me comment. I was honestly hoping that, and I keep mispronouncing your name, and at this point I'm never going to pronounce it correctly because I've mispronounced it so often. I was hoping the coroner, Lisa Derenick, would come on the channel tonight and tell me that I'm wrong, and tell me how I'm wrong, because I don't think it can be explained how his body was kept. And somebody was talking, somebody followed up about the property. I don't know where it went. Oh, Crabell Lodge is rented for parties. I don't know what.
Crabiel Lodge.
They said it's a
Was there any ice fishing that year between? Was there any ice fishing that year between when he went missing and when he was found? Are there any pictures taken? If so, or did anyone ask for any? So I have actually been asking residents, and I have gotten a lot of pictures and photographs from the time that he was missing and some of the time that he was found. And it was a whirlwind. I even went back on timeline, the Weather Underground, and the temperature fluctuation was pretty dramatic. But to answer your question, I don't know anything specific, and it has been brought up before. And maybe you guys know, somebody said that you have to register in Chippewa Lake to ice fish. So were any of those people ever asked Does anybody know?
Not that I'm aware of. Wouldn't it be in the records?
Yes, it should be. Should be in the records.
Whoa.
Was it? Somebody's asking about the pipeline. Was there anything with the pipeline ever investigated as part of Brian's death? Follow the money. I know that that's a huge theory relative to the pipeline. I'm not discounting it. I'm just not. I'm not seeing it at this point, but it also might be by my own ignorance because I'm not the most learned person about pipelines. So I have incorporated it into what I'm looking at. I am looking at the Nexus deals, the pipeline deals, because, you know, there is that old additive about follow the money. But I don't know. Darren, do you probably know a little more, you and Rick, about the pipeline. You want to comment on that, or?
I mean, we didn't find it's hard to get to anything beyond like public record sales, you know. But I mean, like we couldn't get anything as far as like, you know, people had money for an above ground structure put on their property, or anything like that. I mean, it was going through right then. There were signs in everybody's yards. You know, I don't think that. Well, I don't think Brian was for the pipeline, right, Victoria?
Correct.
You know, but you know, I know it's weird when you look at the initial the travel of the pipeline. There were 3 different drawings coming up, and the other 2 didn't include Lafayette Township at all. And then all of a sudden, the final draft comes up, and it's like right through Lafayette Township with a pumping station in this area. You know, but I don't know who all had influence on that.
If you look at the pictures from the investigation too, I thought it was interesting in the conference room. Somebody had opened up the map with the pipeline on it, and there was a newspaper next to it about the pipeline, and that was just like, it almost seemed like staged, like really you were supposed to notice it, but there's a motive, like we don't know.
And I mean, again, I'm probably not going to make people happy. Again, I don't see it at this point. I'm not saying, and again, this goes back to what I said at the very beginning. You look at theories, and but you know, if they're not important, you remember them, you keep investigating them. They may not be important right now. I'm going to put it in the back of my head, and if more of the evidence comes around to show that that's the way, then that's the way I would look at it.
Well, and I think everybody that has looked at this case too can attest to certain people in the township having influence of where that pipeline was being, diverted through certain properties. Well, wouldn't the pipeline people love it when they come in and there's nobody? I mean, there was some pushback, obviously, from Medina residents or Lafayette, but for the most part, when you can call, apparently one of the trustees can call and say, well, we're still building a new fire station, and part of that pipeline is supposed to go on 6 feet off the corner of our building, and you have a trustee that can call up and say, well, that's okay, I can talk to the pipeline people and we could get that changed. Well, pipelines, when they go through towns, they look for things of that nature. They look for maybe infrastructure that isn't very strong, or fire stations that are going to be built, or who's going to give up their property. That's why a pipeline never goes straight through. It's always diverting in different through different towns, different properties. It just doesn't cut through a straight line and that's it. That's where they're building it. It's because if you're coming to a town, you're going to see where the infrastructure needs to be developed. And then if our pipeline comes through, we can offer you money to help you build that structure that you need. So there was a lot of influence with Medina, Lafayette, residents,
And I'll even
allowing them to come through their property to receive big payback for allowing that to go through.
and I'll even throw it out, even something that I thought was somewhat.
Oh, I see. Victoria,
You see
was
it?
Brian about to expose someone or something that you know of? I don't know. But I do know he rode with the deputies on at least a weekly basis. And his reasoning for that was because he wanted to see the needs of each department. And he enjoyed going out with the deputies. He was in the Marine Corps. He enjoyed that. He was going to go in the police force many years ago and decided it wasn't going to be for him. He passed the test with very high numbers, scored very high, decided that's not for me. It after it came down to it, he just didn't want to pursue that career. However, he did ride with them a lot. I do know he saw a lot. So I don't know. It's obviously something to explore. But the reason he rode with them, he would go on fire calls because he wanted to see the needs of the departments that he was going to be paying for them to have certain apparatus. And he always joked when he would do the polar bear jump that he was, they would give him the Gumby suit with the holes in it so that he's like, that way we get new suits because Brian would be cold and, we give him the one with the holes so that we would get brand new suits. So, but yeah, I mean, that's why he did it. He thoroughly enjoyed being part of this township, helping others, and obviously finding the needs of the department, whether it be the deputies who patrol our township or the fire department who would, save us for an emergency call.
So somebody asked who oversees Medina County Sheriff's Department, who would hold them accountable, and ultimately there are agencies. I would say that by Ohio Revised Code, the coroner is the only person that's actually above the sheriff. The coroner of the county can actually arrest the sheriff. I don't think you're going to see that anytime soon.
Oh.
But the question, or my answer would be that the public, you vote for them. So you are in control of Medina County Sheriff's Department would be my answer. And somebody had commented it would make more sense that he was kept somewhere until the lake started to thaw. Yes, I absolutely concur. That's the operating theory. And tomorrow I might have found something where that completely changes my theory, but this is how investigations should go. Yes, right now I think he was in a controlled environment and kept somewhere else until the lake thawed. Somebody says my husband put a patio in at the White House right by where Brian's car was found, and that home had cameras all around. I'm assuming that they may be referring to the house on Bungalow Bay, and I realize I apologize. You asked this some time ago. I don't know if you're still with us or not. I'm assuming you're talking about the house on Bungalow Bay. If that is correct, if I am correct, Miss Producer, please correct me if I'm not. I believe that they were stating that the cameras were not, that they were live, but they weren't recording. Does that sound right to anybody?
I think that's what I remember.
Okay.
Yeah, they would just replay the loop.
I recall hearing about a red pickup truck. Oh, that was a question that. Do you think Sheriff Graves would talk with you personally about this case, or don't dodge like everyone else has? I know that he initially had offered with me, and I had asked I said, hey, can I at least get the records so I can speak intelligently to you? I have not spoken with him since, and I don't know. I may have burnt my own bridges by talking. But in his defense, the sheriff's department that he is currently operating was not the sheriff's department in 2016. I think I actually asked, is there any deputies left?
No.
No. So
Maybe one or two behind the scenes. I think Covey's still there. He's in the evidence room. I'm not sure all the maybe a few, if that.
So somebody was asking where could he have been stored during all that time. I wish I had an answer for you. I don't. Me personally, I think it's somewhere close. If I were thinking of doing something like this, it would be somewhere close. It would probably be in Chippewa Lake, is my theory. You wouldn't want to be carting his body multiple times in a vehicle. It's going to be more chance of being caught that way. So you're going to keep him somewhere close. Your long range goal is to dump him in the lake. You're going to be close to the lake. Is my opinion. Why was the kayaker not interviewed by law enforcement? Excellent question. I would love to know that. I don't. I actually asked Brad in April, the last interview. I said, hey, did you see anybody even talking to the guy? I mean, I know the news was talking to him, but they couldn't recall either, and there's no documentation of him being interviewed whatsoever. Asking about who made money relative to the Nexus, who received the payouts, and again, I think a lot of people made money off of Nexus, even inclusive. And I will put this caveat out. I don't know if he was the prosecutor at the time, but apparently, as I found out, and I just submitted public records for ethics forms, apparently your prosecutor, Forrest Thompson, was involved in a private company prior to his election relative to the Nexus. It seemed like everybody in Medina County.
It was a private task force that was developed that we have names of who was on that task force, and I believe they were hand selected.
Sorry, yeah, I think that made or got us current. I think, although it's showing 32 new chats, I'm not seeing anything. Is there anything I'm missing?
No, he's all caught up.
Okay.
You're all caught up.
You're all caught up.
Okay. All right. You were asking before we close out, Darren and Rick. Did I answer your question? I'm sorry. I think went off in the weeds.
No, I think it kind of paints the picture. You know, I hear like all these different people looking, and it's like, it seems like I don't think necessarily the sheriff's department looked very hard, possibly. I mean, they did a flyover with the plane. They put dogs out there. The park department went all the way around the park. They searched underneath Chippewa Lake multiple times. You know, it seems to me like around the lake was searched pretty decently. That that Brian wasn't there, you know, is kind of my conclusion personally. But I'm just curious on where you were with it.
And again, I mean, people have the theory, oh, it's frozen, it's freezing, it's going to slow down decomp. But if he's outside, he's still going to be smelling. It's still going to be decomposition, whether it's slowed or not. There's still going to be gases being released, and I just think that as many people that were walking around the lake, as I'm finding out, which I didn't even know at the time. I mean, me personally have spoken probably with at least 5 different residents of Chippewa Lake who actively were searching after Brian went missing. And yeah, I mean, I would say it would be more likely than not. But again, there's always the possibility that he's somewhere that they didn't look, but it still doesn't explain the condition of the body. So if anybody can explain that, please do so. Feel free to call me out. call me out and say, hey, in the comments, whether you're watching this tonight, tomorrow, next week, say, hey, Scott, you got it all wrong. This is why. I mean, just don't call me out to call me out. Tell me why I'm wrong. But I think, Victoria, is there anything else you wanted to touch on, or?
Just a couple more comments.
Oh, a couple more. Was there any other information found about the man seen at Minute Mart surveillance with the glasses and hat on backwards? And what time and date was he seen there? Well, we saw photos of it, but again, like any investigation that you see on TV, generally the public can help solve these crimes. They've never posted that picture of the gentleman walking into Minute Mart that morning.
And just to clarify, I wasn't laughing at the question.
Pardon me?
Oh, I just wanted to clarify to whoever just asked that. I was not laughing at your question. I was laughing because I've received several tips just recently about that guy. And that was the reason I was laughing. I just wanted to make sure whoever asked that question, I didn't want you to think I was laughing at you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we saw the photo, and you would think if Medina County Sheriff is enlisting the public to help, why wouldn't they post that picture? Does anybody know this person? You know, it could mean nothing, but you would at least take the opportunity to interview him.
Yeah, absolutely, and they should have. And they still should be looking. But again, in their mind, it's a closed case, so they're not going to devote any more time to it for whatever reason. And I'm hoping to change that.
And with the new information that's been presented, because that's what they told me would reopen the case. And absolutely it should have been reopened because we gave them information to look up.
And the slightly disturbing thing is, again, my recent public records request, Victoria, I see no follow-up. Now, I was told by the firefighter that he did go in and interview with the deputies. And I have asked for those follow-ups. And I don't know if they're just not providing them to me or if they never occurred, if nobody even documented the follow-ups from...
That's part of a public records request, so they need to answer that question.
So...
Or provide the interviews, a supplemental report.
All right. I'll open it up for any last callers before we close out. I think... yes. And again, I prefaced this was not investigated by 3 different agencies.
Right.
It was
And
partially...
I did make this statement earlier in when this first started, that Charlie was very adamant that when we sat down with my attorneys at the time, that he had to go back. He laid out all the box of work that the documents that they gave him, and he had to go back to them and say, look, I don't have this, where is this? So to me, when you're conducting an investigation from what they're supposed to be considered a professional agency, that there's protocol, here is everything. Here's the flash drives, here's the paper documents we receive from record request, whatever it may be. It could be a whole box full of stuff. He had to go back. He said it in one of our interviews that he knows what I'm talking about as, not a very detailed investigation. He said, yes, because I had to go back as well and ask them for documents that were never provided to me the first time.
There was a question, could Sheriff Grice reopen the case? What can we do as local citizens to get Sheriff Grice to reopen the case? And that is to call, email Sheriff's Grice office, call Sheriff's Grice office, tell him that you want it reopened. And yes, to answer your question, yes, he absolutely can. He does not need Forrest Thompson's approval. He is the highest elected law enforcement official of Medina County. He does not need anyone's authority to reopen this investigation. He himself can reopen the investigation, and that's what he should do. But he doesn't need Forrest Thompson to tell him that he can. That seems to be this the theme in Medina County for whatever reason. Forrest Thompson runs everything, but he doesn't. By ORC, or Ohio Revised Code, Grice can reopen this investigation.
Please call, email. I mean, why not? This is us. This is our community. This is our community. Not only don't do it for Brian, do it for your own family. God forbid something like this ever happen again. Who are we going to turn to?
Well, it's happening with Christian Olsen right now.
Yeah, Christian Olsen's family. Who are we going to turn to?
Yes. That's another case that is just totally perplexing to me in Medina County. Christian Olsen. I don't understand Medina County apparently, but I get ripped on for East Cleveland. Our corruption was minuscule compared to what I'm finding out about Medina County. But if he gets reopened, what's the next step? The next step is to make certain that he doesn't just reopen it as appearance. The next step is that he reopens it, and you continue as the public to pressure him to make certain that they are conducting an actual investigation. And he should be public about what he's doing. That's what he should be. He should be the total opposite of what Medina County has done at this point, which has kept everything in the dark and secretive. He should be public. He should have periodic releases of things that his department is doing. He doesn't have to get into the minutia with everybody. He doesn't have to tell you specifically, but he should say, hey, we received these tips and we're looking at these tips. We did this. We collected this. We reanalyzed this evidence. We resubmitted this. That should happen. And so to answer the question, if it is reopened, you guys need to continue the pressure. All the residents of Medina County need to keep the pressure up to make certain. Because Victoria is correct. This could have happened to any one of you. And the fact that it's been allowed to happen to Victoria for this long is just totally absurd. And I know sometimes I don't know. It just boggles my mind the total level of lack of accountability and investigation that this has had. Somebody's asking about reports from the three different. They're talking about again it wasn't three investigations. Are there reports from three agencies? And no, there isn't. There's interviews that were conducted by BCI. There are documentation of those interviews. They were recorded. For whatever reason, they were just audio recorded. I don't know why. Generally, in a case like this, especially nowadays, everything should be video recorded. I don't know why they were just audio recorded, but no. And the FBI, I think there is some 302s, what they were called 302, Form 302s. But again, that's just about evidence that they were handling. They didn't investigate anyone. They didn't go talk to anyone. Nothing of that nature. Actually, I do take that back. I think there was something when their theory was that he left the state. I think that they did call the FBI, and the FBI, I can't remember where it was.
They interviewed his buddy in New York.
Okay.
Yeah, they interviewed his buddy that was in the jewelry business.
But they didn't investigate.
So I do take it back. I take that back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, there was no final nothing. It was just.
I mean, they might have done a couple things, but they didn't
Yeah.
investigate.
Yeah.
So they also bring up Charlie asked several times for the laptop and had to go there personally after several requests. Yeah. And I have no idea, the sheriff's department, basically the way the BCI works is they have to be invited. They have control over certain crimes. I think gambling now, maybe prostitution. I can't remember. But anyways, drugs. They can open their own investigation for drugs also. But for a crime like this or an investigation like this, they have to be invited in. So yeah, why would a agency invite BCI to come in and investigate, and then that agency doesn't even cooperate with BCI? I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I think it's important to note that not having evidence to prove who was involved is very different from proving someone else was not involved. I don't know where that went. Can you put that back up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta read that again.
I think it's important to note that not having.
Not having evidence to prove.
Yes,
someone-
and absolutely. And again, it goes back to the whole premise of if it's not documented, it didn't happen. The fact that the police did not document most of this stuff, yeah, I mean, you can't prove one way or the other, and that's the issue. The issue is that this wasn't even or it wasn't documented. And from
Was
my
that-
understanding,
and then the question is that intentional? What did he know?
yes. And from what I understand,
Sorry.
Detective Cartwright is still a enforcement agent, I think, from the prosecutor's office to this day. Currently, the guy retires from Medina County, and he's an investigator, from what I understand, with the Medina
An
County.
investigator for the cold case unit.
Well, this should be his first case then, from the cold case unit. I'm sorry. Does Victoria think anything to do with this case had something to do with Jeff Hall no longer being the fire chief?
Oh, that's new to me.
Did that happen before? Was he?
I thought
Was he removed?
he was not, I thought that was after, years
Perhaps so.
later. So,
Is there anything? And again, I don't know nothing about this, but
that's something I've never heard of. I mean, I know he was good at the fire chief because he was more a people person, and then Brad Winters was more of a administrative, so that's why they had their definite roles. But that's the first I've heard of that.
and I have attempted to reach out to Jeff Hall. I don't think he has any intention of speaking with me. If I'm wrong, please contact me. But I have attempted to speak with him. I had some questions relative to the fire department. I've been told that he's a bit skittish about this case. Doesn't really want to talk about it. And again, just from the commonality of everything I'm learning about the ex-trustees, I can probably see why he's worried, because apparently they, I keep prefacing, it may have nothing to do with Brian's death, but they definitely threatened a lot of people. What about the guy who pulled the body from the water? Yeah, interesting guy. Darren, Rick, you want to jump in on this? Oh, you caught you sleeping.
We're talking about the fire.
I believe the sheriffs were
We're talking about.
to interview him, and they've yet to interview him.
So supposedly he was. I had just recently interviewed one of the firemen who still maintains that this fireman that pulled Brian out of the water stated that something was tied around him. That firefighter still maintains that that's what he said.
Makes sense.
And he's, again, another person that I've attempted to contact multiple different ways. And
that's why I brought it to the attention of the Medina County Sheriffs, because of the way he was found. And I reviewed how he was found with them, and they were like, well, how do you know that? And I said, well, because I watched the video. There's video, overhead video. And the guy, this detective Covey, was like, well, I haven't seen the video. Do you have the video? I mean, really, who's leading here? I mean, I sent him the video. I even sent him well, I'm not going to say what else I sent, because they still need to interview the person. But, yeah, it's pretty telling.
And so my video, when I was talking about it, talked about external interference. And again, everybody here is welcome to research on their own. If I'm incorrect, please tell me how I'm incorrect. But bodies generally do not, the buoyancy of a body does not go vertical unless there is some sort of external interference. And so when I was talking to April and recently, the firefighter that was on the boat, I was hoping that she was going to tell me, well, there was like ice shelves or something that he perhaps was stuck on. Because again, Google it yourselves if you don't believe me. Bodies do not float vertically. They are either face down or they are what's called supine, face up. Bodies do not float vertically and without external interference. So if he was tied, that obviously would be an external interference of why he would be floating vertically. And how,
And,
again,
and even during recovery, like no one thought that this should be questioned. I mean, we have a coroner that is on one of the boats and she's not questioning this. Like, this is odd. And then you don't even show up at the autopsy to discuss this?
that totally floored me when I heard that interview, and she indicated that she had other things or another death, so she couldn't be at the autopsy.
Because I had to ask after I got the results back, and I said, isn't it supposed to say who was present at the autopsy? And they said yes. And there's no one present.
Yeah, she interviewed with Channel 19 on their podcast, and I mean, she plainly stated that she was not present to the autopsy, which again floored me. I couldn't believe it. And again, she didn't actually perform the autopsy, and I understand. I understand that, but she still should have been there.
Absolutely. And I'm telling anybody, no matter what city you live in, which town, county, state, make sure you know who you're voting for. Please, please. Just because they're a name that you recognize, know what they stand for, know what they believe in. Yeah, I mean, they can lie too, but this is important. This is important for everyone watching, that you, wherever you live, just because they've been there once or been in held that office once, doesn't mean they're worthy to hold it a second time.
So Melody, I'm sorry, I don't know if I should have said the name, but my apologies. Basically asked about, very coincidental that the first time on the lake, which is private, he finds a body, and I'm assuming she's referring to the kayaker, and I agree also that it's just, there's some oddities. I've been told that the kayak that he had was like a kayak that was made for oceans, not inland lakes. And again, I mean, I'm sure it's probably nothing nefarious. I don't know. Maybe there was. Maybe he's the one that put Brian there. I have no idea because he was never interviewed. I'm not saying that he did. I'm not. But I mean, again, it's the fact that he was never even interviewed.
Right.
So, yeah, was there evidence of where a rope would have been tied to him in the autopsy? No, there is not. And again, depending on the state of his body at that point, there may or may not be indication. But no, to answer your question, no, there is no evidence.
I don't know if you guys who was on here to start this whole podcast, but I also wanted to say earlier, I made a statement where I said the Medina County Sheriff said, at any time, if we know something, whether it be who did this or if he's found, whatever, you will be the first to know. Do you know, and I want all the public to know this, that I was never called. I was never called by the Medina County Sheriff's Office to say that we are down at Chippewa Lake. I was called by a prior trustee who was with the sheriffs at the lake when I was sitting at my job. And then they made a statement that they will come and send a car to get me and come pick me up. I said, send a car right now. I waited and I waited. Finally, I said, I'm not waiting any longer. This is about my husband, my life, my family. I'm doing what I need to do. And I got in my car, I turned my flashers on and beat my horn all the way down to Chippewa Lake. And I get there and every one of them are there. Prior trustees, all the sheriff deputies, they're all by the lake. I'm the one that is told to leave the scene. I'm not allowed to walk up towards the scene. They stopped me and walked me back to my car. No one had that. And maybe some people could say that they did that because they didn't want me to see the scene, whatever. The point is, you never asked. You never asked. You are not my voice. I am my voice, and I speak for myself. So for them to make that judgment, it was completely wrong and uncalled for.
Yeah, I
Especially when others were allowed to be, they were allowed to be there and part of the scene. It wasn't even roped off.
and that was brought up by other residents also. How they thought that it was completely odd the day that his car was found, the day that he was recovered, that nothing had been roped off, nothing had really been secured. There's even comments about how quickly his car was, you know, how quickly they left the scene, essentially. But I mean, I apologize to you. I know it doesn't mean anything, but I can't believe that they didn't at least offer. Again, I think I've had discussion with you.
That's what I'm saying. When you're offered help, you take it. You take it. And why didn't you take it? That's my question. Why didn't you take it? Why didn't you accept the help? What were you trying to hide that you didn't want to accept the help from an outside agency?
Has Tom Miller ever answered any questions, curiously?
No.
I mean, about this case, why?
Came up for a whole second. So the trustee drove my car because I was pushed in the back seat. I was sitting back there because I didn't want to be interviewed by anybody that day. So my windows were tinted in the back. So I was sitting back there with one of Brian's friends. She gets in my car and says, "We're going to my house. And by the way, just so you know, it's Brian." And then we're going to sit at my house and wait for the coroner to come in my driveway and for Sheriff Miller to come. I'm sitting there, doors open. I'm on the phone with my family members saying, "Get the hell out of there. What are you doing there?" I said, "I have to wait for the sheriff." They had me captivated. Like I was supposed to, I didn't know any different. Sheriff Miller comes up and says, "It's Brian," and walks away. In my open door, my door is open and I'm back there. They're bringing me the food from McDonald's. Do you want to eat? Flavored what? Don't give me anything. I want nothing. I want to go home. They should have come to my home and talked to me.
Yeah.
And then the coroner comes up and starts pointing her fingers in my face. You need to remain strong. I'm like, who are you? No compassion, no. Unbelievable. From that moment on, I knew. I was like, you know what?
Someone, Victoria, is asking about the, did anyone ever confirm an owner claimed the rope anchor that was posted floating in Chippewa Lake? I don't know if you want to talk about that or.
They did, but I have all the, I have all the information if we need to talk to people about it.
So why was the town hall allowed to be painted so fast after the scene was found? Yeah, we talked about this a little bit. We have no idea. We don't know who authorized it, or even if it was authorized by the sheriff's department, whether the scene was released or not. I haven't seen any documents. Did somebody say that they did see something where they?
Well, apparently there were emails going back and forth from the cleaning company to the trustees. She
But not
was
the-
the one organizing and orchestrating all of it and paying the bills for it.
Somebody, I don't know what, in Tuku, oh boy, I don't know what that is.
I don't think that's,
Does anybody know what that is? It's probably Latin, probably meaning something bad to me. I don't know.
I translated, didn't come up as anything.
Hey,
And-
Scott,
Yeah,
we're gonna have to jump off. This phone's about to die.
yeah, absolutely.
Juice.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us on.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys.
All right, good seeing you, Vicky.
Yeah.
All right.
So if Brian was tied around his feet, that would explain those tall ankle boots Brian was wearing. They were not identified as Brian's. Yes. Yeah. So Brian was wearing someone else's boots when he was found in the lake, and that's a question.
Here's that.
I mean,
Are
I
you-
know years ago he had boots, but this is odd because there was a reference made at the Christmas dinner that someone said, well, he had, before Brian even went missing, they said, well, he had boots on that night. Who the heck looks at people's shoes? I mean, you might notice like if they have bright red shoes on or purple polka dots on them or something. But first of all, when you sit down at a table, or how do you know if someone has boots or if they're in dress shoes? If you're not, like, why would you be looking at someone's shoes or boots? Like, I don't understand that.
Well, the other odd thing is I do remember in Rick's interview, Rick Evans, he commented also that Brian, when he was working, didn't have the tendency to wear boots, that he generally was.
Generally.
Yeah.
No.
So that is a bit of an odd
And I
thing.
know years ago he used to have a pair, like when he would go on like casual business calls or like traveling. But honestly, I don't know. I don't even know. I've never seen those in his closet. Like he would get rid of stuff. He didn't like to pack rat. He didn't like, if there were, bills behind the Keurig machine, he would be going through them, and he didn't like to have clutter. So he would go through his clothes all the time. I outgrew this, or I did this. So I know years ago he had boots, but first of all, a size 12, no. He was a 10.5, depending on the shoe, 10.5 or 11. And those boots were very big. So, from years ago, like I said, he probably had boots,
But it's not like.
but not high boots like not combat-y type high boots like that.
So kudos went out to Invisible Ships. Obviously, they're not with us at this point, but
Yes.
and somebody's asking about the message. I'm not sure which message. If they're talking about the cryptic in Tuku, I actually tried to Google it. I have no idea what that is. If somebody knows, more than welcome to.
I tried to translate it.
Oh, tried to translate it. It couldn't be translated.
Okay. All right. How were prior trustees aware of Brian's body being found before his own wife and family were informed?
Exactly my point.
Well, didn't Linda say she heard it come across the radio, like the police radio, and because she fell and hit her head?
Oh,
That's what
Maybe.
she claimed.
I don't know. She said Linda Bowers heard it come across the police radio because she had fallen and hit her head. But her and her husband were both down there before I was even there. My children were watching this all unfold on Twitter.
Somebody asked, did the boots on Brian match the prints in the township hall? I believe,
would say no.
yes. The report basically stated that they were possibly consistent, but possibly not. It was never shown.
There was a part on the back of the heel that was on the ground, but on the photograph of Brian's boot, that like blemish or something would not, it would have been there on the boot. And there was this, it was like a blemish on the back part of the heel. And I believe too, didn't someone say all those prints were like left foot prints?
Yeah, it was only 1 foot.
It was only 1 foot.
That's interesting. I
wasn't
hadn't even looked at
Like,
that.
it wasn't like left, right, left, right.
It's only like 1 foot stepped in.
It was, yeah, it was like 1 foot.
And so one of the interesting things is the BCI did have some sort of blood pattern person who thought that it was staged. And I still have contacts with the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's office, some of their forensic people. And I thought it was interesting. Again, it was inconclusive. This person thought it was inconclusive, that you couldn't say one way or the other. Nothing leaned heavier one way or the other. I don't know how BCI came up with that finding, but they came up with some pretty logical reasons, like the blood pooling, that maybe he was incapacitated on the ground in that pooling area, and that essentially there were some like transfer marks, I think, either on the room or down the hall, and that could have been from him being dragged and or stumbling, essentially. So again, it's just all of these findings. People think that, well, they hear a snippet and they think that it's conclusive, and it's not. Everything to this point, which is frustrating, is inconclusive. It could be one way or the other, and so for people to basically come out and state, well, hey, no, this happened. Nothing's. I mean, again, if you disagree, let me know. But nothing, in my opinion, can be explained one way or the other. Oh boy.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, even if it was staged, they just assumed it was staged by Brian. Exactly.
The reports say homicide.
Yeah.
The reports do say homicide, and then they change, like, how many months later to the to missing, it was like missing, suspicious missing person or something.
Wait, in January, didn't they say MCSO would still investigate as a missing person, but they wanted BCI to investigate as a homicide?
Yeah, they
before
turned
he
it
was
over to
found?
BCI in June of 2018.
This was in January of 2017 before he was even found.
Yeah, but Forrest Thompson said he wanted BCI to come in. That was in June of 18.
Right.
And he wanted BCI to come in and look at it. And then at that point I said, well, I don't want anything going to BCI Richfield. And he's like, well, why not? And I said, because half the deputies that leave Medina go work at Richfield. And I don't trust any of you.
And just so everybody is understanding, pretty much everybody I talk to, also resident-wise, everybody feels that the sheriff's department is not trustworthy on this investigation. So it's not just you, Victoria. A lot of people feel that it needs to go somewhere other than the sheriff's department to be investigated. Okay. Yes, the bloody blueprints are perfectly aligned and appear to be produced manually.
Right.
And again, like that's a perfect example. Again, maybe it was staged, but it doesn't mean that Brian necessarily staged it.
Correct.
Could have been. There's so many different possibilities to this, and again, that's why it's so frustrating. It's just it needs to be investigated. So I'm hoping that folks with this will put pressure on Sheriff Grice and make him open this, make it investigated. When there is clear corruption, how does a case like this get FBI attention? Good question. I wish I had a solid answer for you. Again, it's a lot of times it's citizen involvement. Phone calls to the FBI can make the difference. Again, if one or two people, Victoria is the only person saying it, they're not going to take it very seriously. But if multiple people from the area are calling saying, hey, we think this needs to be investigated by a third party, a lot of times they do it. So, all right. Last call. I didn't intend, and I apologize, Victoria. I didn't intend
Okay.
keeping this for this long. Last call for any questions here before we taper off. I hopefully I appreciate the questions coming in towards
Thank
the
you.
end. I think everybody here, again, it's this happened in your guys' community. These are the concerns that you guys need to look at. It could have happened to any one of you. So just remember that. Victoria is here talking about an issue with herself, but this could have happened to anybody living in Medina County. So everybody needs to consider that. Everybody needs to put pressure on the sheriff's department at minimal at this point. But Victoria,
Thank
did you have anything else, or?
I think I'm okay. Thank you. I appreciate your time and all your
Excellent.
efforts.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.